born in 1890, found a school in the Mexican desert after the Second World War because he's disillusioned with American consumerism. And so he wants to completely mock American society and creates majors like dog poetry, stuff like this, and selling people a bunch of horrible products. And he's like, I want to show the American idiot consumer in their Levittown picket fence when they buy this stuff how stupid they are, and maybe finally realize I need to search for deeper truth. Why have we jettisoned this? Why have we become so consumeristic, materialistic, whatever? And it's a maximalist, absurdist novel. And what I'm trying to basically reconcile is, I don't know if anyone in the audience will be familiar with David Foster Wallace and his book Infinite Jest. It's a book from 1996 that wanted to talk about the pursuit of happiness in America. It's a very, very postmodern book. And David Foster Wallace himself twice failed RCIA. And he wanted to be Catholic. He was, like O'Connor said, kind of God-haunted and never made it across the finish line. But his book is very, very Catholic, Infinite Jest is, and it shows the reality of sin. Pius XII talked about the greatest sin of our generation is, denying sin.
I feel embarrassment because I'm going to sound like someone, like my grandfather or something, but the word citizen, the idea of being a citizen, it would be to understand your country's history and the things about it that are good and not so good and how the system works, and taking the trouble to learn about candidates for political office, which means often reading stuff, which isn't fun. Sometimes it's boring. When people don't do that, here's what happens. The candidates win who have the most money to buy television advertisements, because television advertisements are all most voters know about the candidates. Therefore, we get candidates who are beholden to large donors and become, in some ways, corrupt, which disgusts the voters and makes the voters even less interested in politics, less willing to read and do the work and do the work of citizenship. When I was a little boy, there was a class called citizenship, and here are certain things about America and America's history. Here's why it's important to vote. Here's why it's important not just to go in and vote for who the best looking candidate is. Here's what's really interesting, and I don't know if you can translate this. Talking about this now, I feel ashamed, because my saying all this sounds to me like an older person saying this, like a person lecturing, which in American culture sets me up to be ridiculed. It would be very easy to make fun of what I'm saying. It'd be very, very easy to make fun of what I'm saying, and I can hear in my head a voice making fun of this stuff as I'm saying it. And this is the kind of paradox, I think, of what it is to be a halfway intelligent American right now, and probably also a Western European, is that there are things we know are right and good and would be better for us to do, but constantly it's like, yeah, but it's so much funnier and nicer to go do something else, and who cares?
Respect means a lot to you. Sort of sense that I'm taken seriously and respected for my work.
You can read this in my face?
Yeah. I can read it in terms of what's been written about you and what you've said.
Show me somebody who doesn't like to be respected. I guess there's a certain amount of ambivalence about, say, the reception that Infinite Jest got, because every writer dreams of having a lot of attention.
You bet.
But the fact of the matter is, this is a long, difficult book, and a lot of the attention began coming at a time when I can do elementary arithmetic. A lot of people hadn't had time to read the book yet. So the stuff about me or interesting rumors that develop about the book and all that stuff getting attention, I found that I didn't like that very much, just because I wanted people to read the book. I'm sorry that I'm essentially stuttering.
No, you're doing just fine.
So other than that, I don't think I'm more hungry for respect than the average person.
Probably American education used to be a little bit better and a little bit more difficult, and children had no choice but to realize that there were certain things that were hard and involved a certain amount of drudgery that were actually very satisfying at the end of it. But for the most part, I think in the U.S., people who've been doing, quote, serious stuff, which is harder and stranger, have always played to a much smaller audience. In terms of what can be done about the dilemma, first of all, I'm wondering who would care what I think, and Second, I'm not sure. And third, what do you think?
Do I highly respect this book? Yeah, I got to admit, I'm one of the people that's in the kind of I love it camp. So what? Like, who cares? As always, like I say sincerely, who cares what I think? Talking about David Foster Wallace's magnum opus, The Beloved, The Despised, The Puzzled Over, This is Absolute Garbage, This is the greatest novel of the past 50 years. All of those kind of polarizing opinions, Infinite Jest. All right, guys. So just skipping around that first section, really, Johnny Gentle, Onan, Incandenza, Subsidized Time. That's a great, maybe like, again, see you, bye, like, go read the book now. Now, this is the funniest line in the whole book on page 407. This is the funniest line in all of Infinite Jest. Gentle has completely lost mind, claims confidant, OUS chief Tyne at press conference. Threatens to detonate upside-down missiles in US silos. Willing to eliminate own map out of sheer pique if Canada nixes reconfigurative transfer of aesthetically unacceptable terrain. So Gentle is going to detonate nukes upside down in US silos. Talked in a previous class, Francis Fukuyama, the last man and the end of history. David Foster Wallace is writing this book in a time where America is clear number one. It's not it's a unipolar world, not a bipolar rivalry anymore. America has the most expenditures and they have friends and Seinfeld and Coca-Cola. And I mean, dead serious, like it's consumerism conquering the world. Please note the concept, I mentioned it before, of soft power. Remember, hard power is invading Iraq. Hard power is Normandy. Bombs is Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Troops on the ground, boots on the ground. Hard power is military capability. Soft power is we're going to get the whole world to watch our comics and wear Levi jeans and build a McDonald's in every country, influence them. Hearts and minds. Consumerism. I don't even know how to... Let me read you what this book's about. Exactly. Your word is so brilliant. Set in an addict's halfway house and a tennis academy and featuring one of the most endearing screwed up families in contemporary fiction, Infinite Jest explores essential questions about what entertainment is and why it has come to dominate our lives, about how our desire for entertainment affects our need to connect with other people, and about the pleasures we choose, about what the pleasures we choose say about who we are. Equal parts philosophical quest and screwball comedy, Infinite Jest bends every rule of fiction without sacrificing for a moment its own entertainment value. It's an exuberant, uniquely American exploration of the passions that make us human, and one of those rare books that renew the idea of what a novel can do. The Infinite Jest is about, and I'll give you the synopsis in a second. Today we have 3 classes on David Foster Wallace. I was going to say that too, of like, okay, so that's our timeline, 1990s. These are the last 3 classes. Today and all next week, Tuesday and Thursday, we're just reading excerpts. I will say one of the greatest times of my life, praise God, was when I worked at the University of Illinois. I just loved it. And I'm not saying this in kind of like bragging way. Like University of Illinois is a great school. It's a public Ivy. It's like a top 20 school every year. So it was awesome to have those resources at your fingertips. And I was just a lowly instructor there. I wasn't some kind of, tenured professor or whatever, but I taught, that's my first kind of real academic job. I got my PhD from Mississippi State in 2016. And then before moving to the Palouse and doing this now, I started this job in 2019 in WSU and then U of I. Later on, that was my Illinois period. Kate, my wife, and I were there from 2016 to 19. I watched the Trump defeat Hillary election in Illinois in our rented house at 2 a.m. Just sitting there watching like a lot of memories from Illinois, including I taught a great class there in the fall of 2017. Just crazy. It's 6 years ago now, 5.5 years ago now. In the fall of 2017 called Fiction and the Historical Imagination. And we read Dostoevsky, We read Walker Percy. I just assigned a bunch of novels, and these kids were awesome. These kids were worthy of, like, this is Illinois public Ivy grade school. They were just great quality. I could just, like, God bless you guys. If any Illinois student ever comes across this, they were just amazing. They're just fantastic quality. I can't say it enough. We covered Infinite Jest in that class. We spent 6 classes on it. I assigned excerpts. We're not going to be able to do 6 classes, but this is kind of you asked if I like this book. Yeah. So before I even taught at Illinois in 2017, the previous summer, 2016, I read it for the first time. I have never read a book with so much rapt attention. I don't know if you have this kind of experience, but you have your day and things to do, and you look forward to doing something at night, right? If there's something good going on at night, you kind of look forward to it. Maybe you've gotten into a new Netflix series. I can't wait for the next episode. Maybe you're going to go see Long Lost Friends at a coffee shop. Every night, I was like, I can't wait to just sit on the couch and read this. I read it all the way through, all 1,100 pages. It's a hilarious book, and then it's a lot of it's footnotes and notes. You have to have 2 bookmarks. You're always flipping back and forth. It's so inspired me as a writer. And again, it's like I say that's just the fact. People hate this book. The famous literary critic Alan Bloom was like, there's not a single ounce of talent in all these pages. It's just garbage. But I'm going to read you some of the positive reviews. Again, this book is like the Donald Trump book. He's either the greatest president of all time, or he's a criminal, the worst guy. I don't know a lot of neutral opinions on this. The only neutral opinions I know in this book are people who have never encountered it. But either they really like it like I do, or they find it disgusting and they hate it. But it very much sums up the 1990s absurdism. I'll tell you the synopsis in a second. And because we have 3 classes left, the next 2 classes are just going to be reading from the book the entire time and doing the Mike Leach thing last class. Here's what he says here. Does this make sense? I'll give you an example here. One of the characters here, Hal in Cadenza, he's one of the main characters, maybe even the main character of the book in this Cadenza family. He's a 17-year-old tennis prodigy. He constantly sneaks away at his tennis academy to smoke marijuana, like in the basement or the bathrooms. And Foster Wallace says, after a while, Hal liked the idea of getting away with smoking marijuana more than smoking the marijuana. What was more of a high for him was secretly doing this, putting eye drops in, and no one would know he did it. Like the drugs had numbed him so much, it wasn't even about the high. Is that true? That's a great comment on modernity. Do people do drugs because they want this high, or do they just like, I'm going to like the idea of my mom and dad not knowing that I'm doing this misbehavior or whatever? Imagine someone who, God bless them, would struggle with like fornication, like hookup culture. Are they? Chesterton famously said, every man knocking on the brothel door is looking for God. They're looking for love. So imagine someone who's become like a serial fornicator, hookup culture. When do they stop even trying that human connection? They just want to be a bad boy. And they're just doing this to break or whatever, break hearts or just misbehave. This book has a lot of great questions like that. So we're just going to go through the whole book, and does this make sense? The book is so weird. I mean, he has one sentence that's like 9 pages long. It's purposely done in a very maximalist, absurdist style. And I'm almost ready to tell you what the book's about. Almost. I'm going to read you some of the reviews, but I want to read you who the author was. So David Foster Wallace, and again, does this have anything to do with me? The fact that his father was a professor at University of Illinois. I lived like a block from his house. That's completely coincidental. This is not like I found out he was here and I wanted to read the author. I mean, that could be a reason, but that was completely coincidental. The fact that, we lived in Illinois, he's from Illinois. Grew up in Illinois. I actually remember encountering this book, I think when I was at Mississippi State. I saw this in a Barnes & Noble. And I was like, this is cool. This looks interesting, whatever. Hi, Ryan. Wow. And I was like, this looks really interesting and cool. And I never picked it up. And I remember just in 2016, for whatever reason, I got it. Speaking of getting an interlibrary loan, I got it from the public library in Nampa. I think I had to order it and read it and just all the way through. You're coming at the perfect time. The last 3 classes are all him, or all David Foster Wallace, all excerpts. I made the mention that when I was at the University of Illinois in the fall of 2017, I did a class called Fiction, Historical Imagination, where we did Infinite Jest. 6 classes. We'll just have 3 of these. But the last point you missed of import was we're just going to, when we get into this, really the next 2 classes next week, just going to be reading stuff like the example I gave. David Foster Wallace says, Hal eventually liked the idea of getting away with smoking weed more than the actual drug, right? It was like the drug had that effect had numbed it, and so he was now more just interested in being like a bad boy or transgressive behavior. We're gonna go through that. Now, who was this guy? Born February 21st, 1962, died in 2008. Sadly, a God of mercy, God rest his soul, committed suicide. A lot of people have seen parallels. One of the other main characters, James in Candenza, who's kind of the patriarch of this family, kills himself in this book, actually by putting his head in a microwave. The book is, again, very, very weird. But a lot of people have seen parallels with the author, David Foster Wallace, and in Candenza, this troubled, brilliant artist, but very haunted kind of person. Apparently, he dated some woman named Mary Kerr. I don't know much about her, but she was a writer as well. And he pushed her out of a moving car or something. Like, it's just like, he had absolutely every kind of, but he got her initials tattooed on his body. Like, anyways. Very, very kind of like, how do I put this? Just classic artist behavior. He was like the novelist version of the guy who trashed the hotel room, the rock star or whatever.
When was he born? In
1962, died in 2008, very recently, at the age of 46. 1962 to 2008. Okay, and I'm just reading here straight up from the most walk on eggshell source, Wikipedia. I think Wikipedia is great, but Wikipedia also can be edited by anyone, and so you got to be careful. And I know enough about this guy that I can read you his Wikipedia, knowing it's not like, oh, and he went to the moon, right? You got to be careful. I always laugh and tell my students, the reason you never cite Wikipedia is not because it's not a good source. It is a good source, just not a reliable source. That makes sense. You got to actually, if you know enough about the person you're researching on Wikipedia, you don't need Wikipedia, right? But you need to know enough to know, because there's BS, implanted there. And anyways, Wikipedia is a good source for basic facts. Let me read you that. He is widely known for his 1996 novel Infinite Jest. Time magazine cited as one of the best 100 English language novels from 1923 to 2005. That's crazy. There's like a couple thousand books published every single day. And the Time magazine, talk about ultimate mainstream, Time Life, right? It says one of the best 100 English language novels. The Los Angeles Times writer David Ulin calls him, quote, one of the most influential and innovative writers the last 20 years. Okay, so he's born in Ithaca, New York. Fine. But like I said, again, he moved to beautiful, impossibly beautiful to explain, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, where he was raised with a younger sister. His father is a philosophy professor at University of Illinois. His mother is an English professor at Parkland College, which is right across town. Yeah, it's a community college in Champaign. These are sister cities. Wallace lives with his family in Urbana, attends Yankee Ridge Elementary School and Urbana High School. I was so close to Urbana High School, I could flick a paper airplane at it. Like, right, it's cool. It's like very warm to my heart, like right next door. Which again, this has nothing to do with why we're having this book, I promise. Nothing to do, just total coincidental. He attends Amherst College, majors in English and philosophy. His first book comes out at a very young age, 1987, called The Broom of the System. And he says this, he tells David Lipsky, this guy who traveled with him in this kind of like, when he does like a rock star tour of this book, and becomes so huge. This book was unbelievable, it was a smashing success in the mid-90s. The publisher sent out like notes to different people, like, it's coming, storm warning. Like, it was just, it took the world, it took the country. I'm going to read you again the reviews before we even talk about what the book's about. Quote, writing The Broom of the System, I felt like I was using 97% of me, whereas philosophy was using 50%. So he eventually goes to, he completes an MFA from creative writing from the University of Arizona in Tucson. But he, for a while, I think a couple months, maybe part of a semester, attends graduate school as a philosophy major at Harvard. That's kind of his background. Professor of parents, writing background, philosophy background. In the 90s, he just goes kind of like, just nuts kind of, I don't know, this Mary Carr woman, his, partner, whatever, girlfriend, describes Wallace as obsessive about her, and the relationship was volatile, with Wallace once throwing a coffee table at her, forcing out of her car. Years later, she said that Wallace's biography, D.T. Max, underreported Wallace's abuse. Of Max's account of the relationship, she tweeted, quote, that's about 2% of what happened. He gets married to this woman, Karen L. Green, who he married in 2004, shortly before his death. Wallace, God bless him, very troubled life, drug addiction. I think one time he's like, I just like hooked up with every person, alive, kind of like, again, that idea, but that Woodstock behavior, like total libertine, sex, drugs, whatever. He ends up in a halfway house, which is a huge inspiration for a part of this book. When this book comes out, let me tell you what the kind of reaction is to it. And I'll read you also from the actual cover itself. But that's basically, just for the sake of time, he becomes an absolute superstar with this book in 1996. And he eventually, he's teaching at Illinois State University, which is in Normal, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half north of Champaign-Urbana. And very aptly named, just kind of farming community. Think like Moscow, Idaho, just in Illinois, central Illinois farmland. He becomes an absolute star. He's the hottest writer in all the kind of New York literary salons. Like his stuff is always in the New Yorker. He's a world famous and absolutely, like, arguably, again, just for hype, like the top American novelist in the 1990s. Take that as far as you can throw it. Again, these are, of course, subjective kind of qualifications, but it's like he's the star. They eventually woo him to Pomona College in California to teach writing there. That's where he dies. That's where he kills himself. Pomona in California. Pomona. M, not N. Pomona. Yes, thank you. I think I did say Pomona, right? Yeah, this is not some kind of other. This is not some kind of other secret school or something. But let me read you just the Wikipedia entry about Infinite Jest. He goes to Pomona and then he'll die there. And one of the biggest things is Wallace, after Infinite Jest, really struggles with writer's block. How do I top this? He never does. Anyone know what his last novel was?
Well, I'm finished with The Pale King.
The Pale King. Have you read The Pale King?
I haven't, but I want to. There's someone Catholic.
It's amazing because I find this book so Catholic, so secret. That's probably why I like it, so secretly Catholic. Speaking of, I cannot forget this part of Wallace twice fails RCIA. So Wallace is raised in some kind of like secular / Protestant background. Wallace is Wallace is a living example of Flannery O'Connor's comment that people are God haunted. David Foster Wallace, no matter how much random sex he had and drugs he did and meaninglessness and life sucks and consumerism, all the things that he pours in this book, was always searching for God. May God have mercy on him. He twice tried to become a Catholic. Why did he fail? I think he described it once in like he didn't receive the answers he was looking for. And remember, he was a philosophy major in these discussions with priests. God bless all priests. May God, as it says in the 10th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, the Holy Spirit will give you the words. May we pray that the Holy Spirit gives priests the words to help people. Could be like, this guy could have been amazing. This guy, talk about Scott Hahn being a kind of evangelist for the church. I mean, David Foster Wallace, the kind of superstar writer, if he had become like a, Journey Home, Marcus Grodi Catholic, it'd be awesome for the church. Too bad, just whatever, he didn't find, he couldn't square his intellectual craving that way. But he, although is not a Catholic, the book is very Catholic in its description of sin, I believe, and the kind of the hopeless condition without Christ. This book equals why you need Jesus Christ. If there's one kind of like, if I can have a Catholic like review of it, this book shows why. If you don't have Jesus Christ, you're just gonna have random sex, do a bunch of drugs, and be meaningless, and probably put your head in a microwave. That like the character does here, like that kind of stuff. Like you need Christ. And the book does a great job of showing that. Pope Pius XII bemoaned that the greatest sin of our generation is the denial of sin. David Foster Wallace is not guilty of that. He shows the sin very, very well. We'll talk about again. I know I keep going towards this, but I want to really lay the groundwork well. So next week we can spend 3 hours, both those hour and a half classes, just reading from the book. I already have all the notes sketched out of where we're going to be reading from. Anyways, okay, so it sold 44,000 hardcover copies in its first year of publication. Since then, it sold over 1 million copies worldwide. It's become absolutely kind of a cult classic. It's freaking hard to sell 1 million copies of a book that a lot of people give up on immediately. I give props to my boy Ryan Alexander. He understood every word, like Thomas Aquinas. This guy's a genius. Most people are like, most people, they get 10 pages in, whatever, right? I've heard so many people, the majority of people that I know that know about Infinite Jest quit trying to read Infinite Jest. They're like, oh yeah, I read the first 100 pages. Good luck selling a 1,100 page book with sentences that are 9 pages long sometimes, footnotes, two bookmarks, and some of the stuff he said. I wonder if I can even open up randomly. Yeah. Okay, so even like, let me see. Okay, ready? Just random up from page 191. Like for months in the spring of semester YDPAH, she referred to her own program as Madam's Downer Lit Hour and read depressing book after depressing book. Good Morning, Midnight, and Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, Giovanni's Room Under the Volcano, plus a truly ghastly Bret Ellis period during Lent. In a monotone, really slowly, night after night. Mario sits on the low, little Van der Rohe knockoff coffee table with bowed legs, with his head cocked right up near the speaker and his claws in his lap. His toes tend to point inwards when he sits. The background music is both predictable and within that predictability, surprising. It's periodic. It suggests expansion without really expanding. Like you got to get, and again, of course, right? I can read you the most simple prose from any book and you know context. I think everybody is sufficiently intelligent to read this book. That is disgusting, right? Ooh, only the really smart people. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying most people out-intimidate themselves with this book. They're just like, no, I'm not even going to go there. Anyone can read this book. It just takes work, which I think is very cool. But anyways, yeah, go ahead.
I think comparing him like Leighton Joyce maybe, or Thomas Pynchon.
I think Thomas Pynchon, especially Gravity's Rainbow, yeah.
When I compare his prose, it demands your whole attention, but it's not pretentious for the most part. Joyce is just like, I'm just going to throw random sounds down on the page and you got to follow along with me. Wallace is like, I'm going to give you words which all make sense and they're communicating meaning in every sentence, and you better damn well pay attention to every single one is what's going on with them. And that's the difference I find between him and other postmodern authors.
Yeah.
Just on prose level.
Sure. It's just, yeah, I mean, okay, and fair enough, like truly, sincerely fair enough. Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, you asked the book, Pat, you asked when the class started, do I like this book? A lot, very much. I mean, I've read it like 5 times, so it's like, I do like it a lot. But and I agree with how the way Ryan explained that very well, I think, is that it's postmodern without being pretentious. It's not just, I'm going to use fancy words, ha ha, and you don't know what these mean, you have to go look it up, ha ha. Like, it's like, no, it's like some really, really good points. Even that sentence I read there, like the knockoff Van der Rohe coffee table. Who's Van der Rohe? Oh, it's Mies van der Rohe. He was a protege of Walter Gropius, one of the Bauhaus school founders. And you can just dive into American architecture. It's like there's a lot of keys and things. Like it forces you to expand into like the knowledge. I think
you have to think about what's funny about reading Bret Easton Ellis.
Who wrote Bret Easton Ellis was the American Psycho guy, right? During Lent. Exactly. Yeah. This horror story during Lent. Exactly. There's this very interesting kind of like, right? Very interesting prods and pokes and stuff all throughout. No. So I'm actually going to read you one footnote today. I think we're just going to get to one thing today. I think I'm going to just, for the purpose of time, because I'm not even kidding, y'all, next class, like pedal to the metal. We're just going to go right into it. I think I'm just going to read you one actual section from the book today. Just I wanted to spend all this time just getting the feel of the author, which I think is fine because you have 3 classes with him. It'd be different if it's like, well, I just said 1 class. Well, you can't. Either you do Infinite Jest 3 classes or 6 classes like I did in Illinois, or you just don't do it at all. You can't do it in 1 class. No, a lot of the footnotes, I'll tell you, the footnotes are just, they're descriptions of stuff. I'm going to read you James Incandenz's filmography. That's the footnotes we'll do today. And I'll explain who that is, what that is in a second. Development. Wallace began Infinite Jest, quote, or something like it, various times between 1986 and 89. His efforts in 1991 were more productive. From early 1992 to the novel's publication, which, like I said, was 96, excerpts from various drafts appeared sporadically in magazines and literary journals, including Harvard Review, Grand Street Conjunctions, Review of Contemporary Fiction, Harper's, Iowa Review, New Yorker, and LA Times Magazine. Very cool. The book was edited by publisher Little Brown and Company's Michael Page. Page made suggestions and recommendations to Wallace, but every editing decision was Wallace's. He accepted cuts amounting to about 250 manuscript pages. So this is supposed to be 1,400 pages long. The novel gets its name from Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 1, Infinite Jest, in which Hamlet holds the skull of the court jester Yorick and says, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, most excellent fancy." His working title for Infinite Jest was A Failed Entertainment. Am I trying to compare myself to David Foster Wallace right now? Yeah, actually. I have a novel coming out this summer. I had a working title for it called Job Search. My editor was like, no. And so it's called Thermonuclear Mirth. For what it's worth. I guess that's a common occurrence. Same thing happened for my dissertation. I wanted my dissertation to be called Dogma and Dixie. That was cool. Catholic Confederates. Like, no, we're going to be called Catholic Confederates. So there is some kind of like, he wanted it to be called a failed entertainment, which that really explains what the book's about, probably better than Infinite Jest. But Infinite Jest, I mean, we have this kind of presentism. I almost want to say fatalism, but like things are, they should have been that way, I guess. Of course, it had to be Infinite Jest. No, it didn't have. It could have been, he wanted it to be failed entertainment. But now everyone knows it worldwide as Infinite Jest. Well, of course, it could be nothing else. We kind of put contingency to the side when things are, right? It's like, well, was it guaranteed that Ryan Alexander had to go to Wyoming Catholic College? No, it wasn't, right? God knows in his omnipotence, omniscience from all eternity that he was going to do that. But like that wasn't predestined, written in the stars. All right. Let's talk about what this book's about. Actually, before we talk about what this book's about, let's read the reviews. Betsy Johnson has a chat. Betsy, I'm not even going to lie. I see I have a little red one that says you wrote something. I'm not even going to open it because I don't care. So we're just going to move on. It's not worth even checking what it is.
Real quick, you mentioned postmodern. When does modern start? Not properly after World War I and say, but I mean, you can, I don't know, some definitions of modernism, modern stretch all the way back to Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes, but really about 1900, and depends on the place and culture and stuff like that. Postmodern doesn't really properly begin until the 1960s, and I'd say specifically 1968, with the sexual revolution ideas bubbling out of academia into reality, the revolutions of 68 in Europe as well.
Yeah, and
but fitting it into Wallace's kind of fun. Wallace is a huge critic of postmodernism. He was sick of it. He wanted to get past it. He's like, look, I'm done with this. I'm tired of its inauthenticity. I'm tired of its irony. Let's get back to what's authentic, what's real. Let's tell real stories, and let's move forward.
Now, when you say postmodern, you mean in the modern age, not after the modern age stops.
So post meaning after.
Yeah. Well,
after the start of the modern age.
Well, we use modern like a synonym for contemporary nowadays, which is what makes it confusing.
Yeah.
But I think particularly we are postmodern, or especially postmodern now, more so than we were 15, 20 years ago. I think America took the longest to get to postmodernism, but we're definitely postmodern.
Yeah, fair enough. In architecture, modernism is defined by Bauhaus school, modernism being so philosophically as well about the machine, not so much the human being, but the worker being, glass cube, box, whatever. Postmodern architecture at Frank Gehry, Santa Monica House Eating a House, or Experience Music Project in Seattle, Smash Electric Guitar is like the transgression of the modernism. Modernism is already post World War I transgressing against the verticality and iconography of the ages of faith. Stuff like Gothic and Baroque and Rococo is already rejecting that in favor of like a communist block style. Postmodernism is just complete nonsense. And so he's out nonsensing the nonsense and maybe trying to call us back to something better and in his own personal life. And Betsy Johnson asked a great question before I read the things here. Does his suicide affect your judgment of his works? No. And I'll say because my favorite story about this is Father Crappie. I've mentioned the story before. The woman who comes to him is despairing. My son killed himself. He jumped off a bridge and I'm despairing that he's in hell. Father Crappie, this guy was 100% anti modern. He wasn't like, oh, it's fine. Everyone's saved no matter what. He wasn't like that. But he's like, you're not God. God is all merciful. God is outside of time and space. You can pray the rest of your life. Maybe you have 40 years left to live for your son's soul, and God can apply those prayers to the moment your son hit the water. Maybe he'll be in purgatory. Maybe he'll be saved. God alone can judge. Who knows why? Maybe he's not culpable for his death. Maybe he, was insane at that moment or whatever. No, it doesn't affect his judgment. Number one, because I want to just pray for his soul. I fell so in love with this author that I got to I think we all should pray for the souls in purgatory daily. I pray for David Foster Wallace's soul often. Not in a specific dwelling on it. When I mention the people that have died in my life, like my grandparents, things, I'll pray and may God rest David Foster Wallace's soul in heaven. If he's in purgatory, so I pray for him. I don't think that somehow, his suicide, again, I'm anti-predestination 100%. I don't think that, oh, he was telling us something the whole way. He does seem to be fixated on suicide often. One of the main characters of the book commits suicide here. And he does seem to be kind of haunted in that sense. He fought with a lot of maybe even real demons in his life in this Valley of Tears. But no, I think like where I think it's bad is when people like glorify suicide, God forbid. Like when people are like, into like Kurt Cobain because he killed himself, the Nirvana singer. Oh, that's cool. It's artistic. That's awful. That's God rest his soul. So I think it's very, very, very sad. But so I just think like, I just want to say, God alone can judge. And I want to pray for those people. And, maybe he's in purgatory. He needs our prayers. It won't, just like Father Crappie's audios are still good. Father Crappie's audio, he's really great. I told you, my favorite Father Crappie, I don't want to say story, but homily, presentation, might have been at a conference, is humility is a nuclear spiritual weapon. Humility, spiritual nuclear bomb, or something like that. He talks about the import of humility. Okay, so remember, Alan Bloom, Alan Bloom is famous kind of critic, says there's not a single ounce of talent in this book. And Alan Bloom saying there's no talent is like, remember Simon Cowell from like the singing competitions? It's like Simon Cowell saying your voice is terrible. I mean, he's a renowned, this might have something to do with Alan Bloom having his ego poked, because David Foster Wallace called his works turgid. Anyways, that's one opinion. Some people don't like this book, but listen to people that do like it. Newsweek, truly remarkable. What weird fun, infinite jest is to read. New York Times, uproarious. It shows off Wallace as one of the big talents of his generation, a writer of virtuosic talents. He's a virtuoso. Virtuosic talents who can seemingly do anything. New York Observer, a big, brilliant book. Wallace is a mesmerizing storyteller. Orlando Sentinel, challenging and provocative. Voice literary supplement. Wallace is the funniest writer of his generation. Elle, a blockbuster comedy. No other writer now working communicates so dazzlingly what life will feel like the day after tomorrow. Spin, an acidic, freestyling 1,088-page encyclopedia of hurt. Infinite Jest wrangles an enormous cast of engagingly whacked out characters into a frequently hilarious but ultimately tragic epic. And my favorite review comes from New York, quote, spectacularly good. It's as though Paul Bunyan had joined the NFL or Wittgenstein had gone on Jeopardy. Infinite Jest is colossally disruptive. Next year's book awards have already been decided. If I was going to think about, as a writer myself, who my biggest influences are, I'd say my father is number one. He does more poetry than anything else, but just like, it's awesome. Like, I'll be the son of a blacksmith and you become a blacksmith. My father, number one. And then outside of that, Chesterton, Percy, and David Foster Wallace probably. I mean, I really think when I write, even if I, like in the immortal words of John the Baptist, I'm not worthy to unstrap their sandals. Like, I'm nothing compared to these true giants. I still am influenced by them and try to like bring to the paradoxical and faith-filled writing of Chesterton, like the orthodox, literally, and the orthodoxy, both book title and the kind of style, but in this postmodern shell. So, I mean, I love this book. A lot of people do, but if you don't like it, I get it. So what is this book about? Before, in the last 10 minutes, I read you a couple of just small excerpts, because again, I swear to you, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, ladies and gentlemen, peeps, everybody, next week, none of this, just straight into the veins. We're injecting infinite jest into our veins. What is this book about? Well, it's set a little bit in the future. Some people say it's set like in 2008, 2009, 2010. He doesn't really specify, but it's written in 1996, set 10, 15 years in the future. At this time in America, there's something called ONAN, the Organization of North American Nations. What is the sin of onanism? Who knows what this is? What is the sin of onanism? What is onan? Right, masturbation, spilling his seed on the ground. Wallace says right away, this Organization of North American Nations, which is USA, Canada, and Mexico, they're one thing. And and the president, again, whatever you think about Trump, he has a president come around who leads ONAN called Johnny Gentle, who's the cleanest man in entertainment because he's a germaphobe. He's literally cleaning his hands 1,000 times a day. And he's exactly like Trump. It's the most prescient part of the book. ONAN is the ruling thing in What is America? And Wallace right away is saying, we're entertaining ourselves to death. So the name of our country is masturbatory. Entertainment in this very, I don't want to be vulgar and gross, but seriously, why is masturbation so bad? Because you're completely closed in on yourself. You're saying, I don't even need another person to participate in this, be fruitful and multiply. I just can do my own thing, literally, and so gross, right? And he's basically saying, look, we've named our culture after our country after masturbation. Even kind of like, and a lot of people don't know onanism. What is that? That's the brilliance of his book. It's so Catholic, so biblical, and a very like below the text. The name of your country is masturbation because your culture has become just sitting around watching stuff the whole time. Okay, so people are drowning in this kind of entertainment industry. In fact, let me read for you page 223. The consumerism has become so bad, and I purposely hate this, how stadiums are called like, you know, talk about how much things he predicted, you know? I love that we still have the Kibbe Dome. I'm glad it's not Idaho Bank Dome. Oh, but our basketball arena is, right? Our basketball arena is like Idaho Bank Credit Union something, right? Crap like that. Wallace says people are so onan, years now are named after things. So he doesn't name years. Listen to what he says. Chronology of organization of North American nations revenue enhancing subsidized time by year. So the year is not, let's say 2000. Yeah. So the year, so listen, let me tell you the years in his book. Ready? He has 9 years in his book. And imagine like 2000 to 2008, whatever you want. But no, year number 1, year of the Whopper. Year number 2, year of the truck's medicated pad. 3, year of the trial-sized Dove bar. 4, year of the Purdue Wonder Chicken. 5, year of the Whisper Quiet Maytag Dishmaster. 6, year of the Ushitsu 2007 Mimetic Resolution Cartridge View Motherboard Easy to Install Upgrade for Interfron Interlaced TP Systems for Home, Office, or Mobile. 7, year of Dairy Products in the American Heartland. 8, year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. 9, year of Glad. So he'll throughout the book, he'll be like, you know, March 22nd, YDAU, you know, year of the dependent adult undergarment. Our society has become so onanistic, right? We even have names. The Burger King is sponsoring a year. It's like, is he wrong? Isn't that brilliant? I mean, is he wrong in saying that? No, we're not probably far away from that. You know, already it's like, if you watch like soccer, and I'm not a soccer fan, but if you watch soccer, you have like, Manchester United, it doesn't even have it on their jersey. They have like AIG Bank or whatever or something. And we already have year of the Whopper behavior. And if this inspires you to get this book, like even just that one thing, I mean, the whole thing is like every single page. I think Ryan said it so good. Like everything is like, you got to pay attention and get into it, but everything has some kind of a deeper like point to it. And his point here is I think it's one of the strongest points, how much he hates postmodernity, is we're so gross and vulgar and materialistic that we would name a year after Burger King. Like if Burger King somehow, if the government subsidized time and convinced Biden, he's like, you know, how about we have, you know, the year of woke, I don't like whatever. They would do it if it was enough money. If there's enough money involved, right? Because you only can serve God or mammon. And this book is about serving mammon. Now, that's only one thing out of it. Onan, subsidized time. You have this great concavity, right? Like in the in what is used to be like New England, which is like a garbage dump where everyone, it's like radioactive material. You have feral hamsters. That's bad. So America is like this conglomerate, masturbatory, entertain themselves to death, dumping ground with a literal wasteland in what used to be like Vermont. And then you have different characters. Who are the main characters? The main family is the Incondensa family. James is the patriarch. And he's this avant-garde filmmaker and do-it-all polymath who founded this tennis academy called Enfield Tennis Academy. By the way, I forgot this part of Wallace's biography. Wallace was a nationally ranked junior tennis player. He's a very good, imagine like, I don't understand tennis at all. I think it's like golf and like the rankings and PGA Tour, but that's like things I do understand, like football. Being a nationally ranked junior tennis player, like he was all state in high school and was a huge college recruit. He was good at tennis. He wasn't just like, oh, whatever. He was a serious tennis player. He was on that path to become a professional tennis player, and then either wasn't good enough or whatever. He was like, when he was a kid, he trained tennis for real. So he takes that knowledge, takes so much of himself in this book, as all writers do. One of the main settings is the Enfield Tennis Academy in Massachusetts. And At this tennis academy founded by James Incandenza, the filmmaker, avant-garde guy, he's no longer in the picture because he's dead. Remember, he put his head in a microwave and killed himself, like in Year of the Burger King or something, like really early in the story, early in the chronology. But his widow, his wife, and they were like super unfaithful to one another or whatever. His wife, Avril, runs this academy. She runs the Enfield Tennis Academy. Her sons are Oren and Hal. Oren is a football player for the Arizona Cardinals, and he's a punter. And Oren was a tennis player that all these kids are at this Enfield Tennis Academy, and Oren found out randomly once by picking up a football and punting it. He punts like 90 yards. Like it's purposely obscene. It's like, it's so good that he goes right to the NFL, basically. He ends up punting for, I think, at Boston College or something, and then goes to the NFL. Oren is like the worst guy of all time. Or Oren is this scumbag, immoral figure. He's a punter for the Arizona Cardinals. He has this thing where he goes on a date with a girl and tries to have sex with a different girl while he's on a date with that girl. So he would like be dating this girl and then like excuse himself and leave and go hook up with some other girl and come back. Like, sin run rampant, right? He's showing this by like, how can I, maybe Wallace was saying, how can I show the kind of promiscuous culture that he unfortunately, fell into himself? How can I show the absurdity of like, okay, I'm just going to be totally animalistic and just complete give into that? Probably a behavior like that. This guy has so little control over his passions. It's not even enough for him to be on a date with a different woman every night. He leaves that date to go be with a different woman in the middle of that date and purposely to like unite this discussion for the purpose of breaking hearts, for the purpose of like, yeah, I'm going to use you and leave you and stuff. So that's Oren. That's one of the sons. Hal is the kind of one of the main characters. He's in this tennis academy in his teenage years. The year of Glad, which is the last year, is only talked about in the first 16 pages. The end of the book is the beginning. Talk about postmodern, but he's being recruited at the University of Arizona to play tennis. Tennis Academy is one part of it. Next to Tennis Academy is this halfway house, where Don Gately is the main figure, and Wallace goes into a lot of the issues there, back and forth. That sounds too much of the world I grew up in. Betsy, then you got to read it. I mean, yeah, this is like, if you were born in Wallace was born 1960, 1970, early 80s. I mean, like if you lived the 90s, I can't say that I lived the 90s so much. I was born in 87. So I was 13, at Y2K. I mean, but if you were any kind of adult in the 90s, old enough to experience stuff, to go through college in the 90s, I mean, yeah, this is probably your life. It's kind of like unlimited. We're on number one, but maybe we entertain ourselves to death and drown in this kind of like sea of licentiousness. Tennis Academy, halfway house is there. There's this undercurrent of these guys who are wheelchair assassins. And this guy, Remy, he's the main character, and they're trying to overthrow Onan. And the whole book circles around the fact that James Incandenza, this is hilarious, made a movie called Infinite Jest, which is so seductive, it kills you. That's the whole point. And what's hilarious, I thought, this book. This book killed me for 4 months. I was entertained to death by this book. Like the book is the movie. I couldn't put it down. The first time you're introduced to this is there's this Saudi attaché, this Saudi diplomat, who comes home and he's like, has this very classic traditional relationship where his wife just like has dinner ready for him, puts stuff in. She puts in a cartridge for him, a DVD, and they find him 3 days later dead. Like he watched this, forgot to eat, whatever, soiled himself, just died. Infinite Jest is so, Wallace is making the point, right? Just like the Oren guy is just scumbag, hooks up with a girl while he's dating a different girl. Entertainment culture is so bad, that's where we're headed. We're headed to the point where there are some people who say, I'll die for my entertainment. And is he not right? Ask some teenage kid how you feel if you take away social media. You might be like, oh, I'd rather die. I mean, this is where this book is getting towards. Infinite Jest is a movie. He never explains why. But apparently this woman called the Pea Goat is in it. Prettiest girl of all time, Joelle. She's in this movie.
You want to spell her name?
Joelle, Joelle.
No, you said Pea Goat?
Pea Goat. It's an acronym. PGOAT. Prettiest girl of all time.
Oh, that. Okay.
Yeah. The whole book has these stupid acronyms, whatever, YDAU. You're the adult undergarment. You're the dependent adult undergarment. I'm glad we're doing this kind of slow build preamble. So when you start reading from this the next 2 weeks, you know what you're in for. I mean, it's just like crazy stuff. But anyways, that's the whole part of the book, is that these terrorists and different groups trying to find, especially the Quebecois terrorists, are trying to find what they call the entertainment, or the samizdat, the Infinite Jest, and then distribute it across America, across Onan, and everyone will be like, right, die, and they can take over the whole country. So while America entertains itself to death, we're going to overthrow the government. It's the kind of message of the book. It's unbelievable. And they have to eventually dig up the corpse of James at the end, and maybe it's buried in his head, maybe not, I don't know. His ghost makes an appearance. It's a wraith, very Hamlet-esque. It's freaking epic. This is so anyways, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I think the two like big literary parallels, rhyming schemes are Hamlet and The Brothers Karamazov.
Mm-hmm.
Two that I would,
yeah,
I can draw the most comparisons between.
I didn't even talk about Mario, his special needs brother. Yeah,
absolutely. There's this character. He's the third Incandenza son is Mario. Or actually, he's the second. He's the second son.
He's older than Hal. Yeah,
he's older than Hal, and he's probably like he's horrifically physically deformed, but he's also the most caring, only genuinely loving person in the entire novel. He's
like the prince from The Idiot.
Yeah,
he's just very, very good-hearted, holy kind of guy, holy to the point of naivety almost.
He's like a St. Francis of the CC type, right? That's just the best way. Like he will be around in the middle of people's muck and sin, and the only thing will it's just like he's just there sharing.
So for love, yeah. Are you guys convinced? I mean, you're gonna go run and get this. This is freaking. I mean, you can get this online for like $9. When the book is so popular, I mean, you can find runs of this. I bet you can find this in like Bruce Books in Pullman. I don't know what used bookstore. I love Bruce Books. Shout out to Bruce Books. Bruce Books. It's a great place. I'm going to show you guys, by the way, a rap song that I made about my father-in-law after the class is over. Just because. Anyways, but not on camera.
Your boy always got that giddy laced up. Your boy always got that giddy laced up. Your boy always got that giddy laced up. So what? Said your boy never get paid. Read about me in Forbes. Said never get followers, but I followed by hordes. Golden horde, I'm a going full Genghis. If life's a game, your boy Billy and dis tau win dis. My solely you can hit dis. Dial digits, just hit this. I run Napa. Not the mayor, the alderman, nah, but trust me, I run Napa.
But I bet you can find this in Bruce Books for a very good price. Now, last thing, I'm going to finish the class now. This was great. Praise God. Because next week, again, we can just burn my little analogy, we can just like get right to it. Page 985, James O. Incandenza filmography. So this is some of the films that James Incandenza made. The following listing is as complete as we are able to make it. Now, by the way, you asked for the footnotes. This footnote is like 9 pages long. He has some footnotes like this. Footnote number 71. Ready? Footnote number 71. So you've seen 71, you go to the back, what's going to be here? Quote, the Boston AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the Boston AA slogan is, you can't unring a bell, period. So some footnotes just one sentence, or like he was a Pakistani guy, period. And some is like 9 pages. The book has no rhyme or reason, like strap into that postmodern absurdity. It's like some that are 1 sentence long. Here he has footnote number 21, QV, meaning, C, example, note 211. Okay, thanks. Got to go more down the rabbit hole. You got to like work with this book. You got to grind with this book. Footnote number 24, page 95, about his filmography. Remember, this is the brilliant patriarch genius, James Incandenza, who people tragically have compared Foster Wallace to, who kills himself by putting his head in the microwave, but founds this academy first, is very instrumental, makes this, Incandenza in this imagined world is the most important figure. He made he's a Manhattan Project figure. He made a nuclear weapon, a movie that's so entertaining you die when you watch it, literally, not haha, actually. So it's a weapon of mass destruction, right? So anyways, Betsy writes, I grew up 2 blocks from Seattle Tennis Club. Betsy, you need to read this book. If you said the 80s, yes. 80s, you grew up in this time, tennis club. I mean, you were probably, there are parts in this book. Wallace was a great junior tennis player. Like I said, there's out of the 1,000 pages, probably 300, 400 are sports stuff. It's a very sports book. A lot of, they play this thing called like, what is the name of the tennis game called? Eschaton, yeah. Like they do nuclear weapons with tennis serves and stuff. Like it's just amazing.
It's like 4 games where they chalk out a big world map of tennis sports.
But with tennis, yeah.
And then they have to do these really complicated calculations. And they're lobbing tennis balls at different cities around the world. Absolutely.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. God bless this guy. May God have mercy.
Like the older tennis players are supervising them. It ends with a kid getting a TV slammed on.
Yeah, exactly.
He still has on his head too.
Well, here's the stupidest thing. So Foster Wallace, I can't believe I almost forgot this. If I read the footnotes, he asked the question, is it okay if you're dating someone, right? And they say, well, if you break up with me, I'm going to jump off a bridge, right? Is that okay? No, it's not okay, right? You can say, I'm sorry, I don't want you to jump off a bridge. The relationship's over. There's a character in here named Eric Clipperton who became the #1 tennis player because he played tennis tournaments with a gun to his head. So he would play and be like, and he told his opponent, as soon as I lose, I'm going to shoot myself. So he never lost. And it's like, can you imagine? Like, first of all, what's so absurd about this is the tennis academy would say, excuse me, and they would call the cops. You can't have a gun on a tennis court, right? They wouldn't let him play. But it's such a great, insight into like, can you blackmail people morally? I'm not that good of a tennis player, but I bet if I play with a gun and say, I bet if I play with a gun and I'm serving with you and whatever, I don't know how you play that way, but I bet if you say, well, I don't want to be responsible for him dying, right? And how many girlfriends have done that? Well, I guess I'll date you more. That's wrong. Emotional blackmail is wrong. Betsy said, I just bought it. Good, Betsy. I can't wait to hear what you think about it. Okay, anyway, so page 995, James Incandenza filmography. What are some movies he made? I'm just describing his whole filmography. Flux in a Box. Documentary cast with narrator Judith Fukuoka Hearn. Documentary history of box, platform, lawn, and court tennis from 17th century Court of the Dauphin to the present. Then next, Infinite Jest, 1. So black and white, silent, Incandenza's unfinished, unseen first attempt at commercial entertainment. Union of Nurses in Berkeley, documentary. Closed caption interviews hearing impaired RNs and LPNs during Bay Area healthcare reform riots of 1996. Cage, 2. Sadistic penal authorities place a blind convict and a mute convict together in solitary confinement, and the two men attempt to devise ways of communicating with each other. Fun with Teeth, 73 minutes, black and white, silent with non-human screams and howls. This is the movies he made. Infinite Jest, number 2. There was the second attempt at creating this kind of perfect entertainment. Let's see, Zero Gravity Tea Ceremony. The intricate Okachai is conducted 2.5 meters off the ground in Johnson Space Center's zero gravity simulation chamber. Where is this here? Let me see.
The prenuptial agreement of heaven and hell. God and Satan play poker with tarot cards for the soul of an alcoholic sandwich bag salesman obsessed with Bernini's The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Yeah.
Or like here,
59 minutes, color, sound.
Yeah. Dial C for concupiscence. The predilection to sin since the fall. He finally, the last thing he makes, the last footnote he has, Infinite Jest 5. This is when he finally makes this perfect nuclear weapon. Infinite Jest 5, Year of the Trial-Sized Dove Bar. For York Entertainment Limited. Madam Psychosis. Madam Psychosis is also Joelle, the P-Goat, produced girl of all time. No other definitive data. Thorny problem for archivists. Incandenza's last film, his death occurring during post-production. Most archival authorities list that as unfinished, unseen. Some list its completion of Infinite Jest 4, for which Incandenza also used Psychosis, thus list the film under Incandenza's output for YTMP, Year of the Tux Medicated Pad. Though no scholarly synopsis or report of viewing exists, 2 short essays in different issues of Cartridge Quarterly East refer to the film as, quote, extraordinary and far and away his most entertaining, compelling work. Though Canadian archivist Tet Besh lists the film as complete and privately distributed by PYEU through posthumous provisions in the filmmaker's will, all other comprehensive filmographies have the film either unfinished or unreleased. Okay, and it's like this is just like goes throughout his best thing is closing up, class over. He has a film where he tells people, Incandenza does, called The Joke, and he purposely markets it to pretentious Berkeley people. And the poster says, if you're an idiot, you'll see this film, don't see this film. Like I warned you. They come in, they sit down, and the film is simply the room being projected back onto the screen. So they come, they sit there, they see themselves, and it doesn't turn off until the last person leaves. So it's The Joke. So this guy, that is the main character truly of the book, this patriarch guy, although he's dead throughout the story, has created the academy that his wife runs. She herself of Quebecois origin, so connected to these terrorists somehow, and his 3 sons, Mario, Oren, and Hal, and the Great Concavity and Onan and Johnny Gentle and all these things. That's what this whole book is about. And it's just, it really, and I haven't even mentioned enough about the halfway house. He goes into deep detail about the halfway house. And even like, you know, at one point, some guy breaks down in some therapeutic session. He has to hug his teddy bear in the middle of the circle, and everyone's clapping for him. Like, he really goes deep. He went through this kind of AA, NA kind of like stuff, Narcotics Anonymous. So anyways, Betsy Johnson, you are just a woman of impeccable intellect, and it's an honor to have you on the stream. Thank you for being here. God bless you. I hope you do enjoy the book. Love to talk to you about it. Ryan and I, back in the fall, had a discussion about Infinite Jest. It was very fun in Monica's. I really enjoy, you know, I never want to, and truly blessed be God forever, I never want to sound like an evangelist for this book. That's so gross. I don't even use like that word. I want to be an evangelist only for Christ, only for the Gospels, period. And to any like Protestants that are listening, if you're going to read the Infinite Jest, read the Bible, please read the Bible. Duh. Like, there's no, it's like, oh, this book will change your life. No. It's a fiction book. And it's like, I even want to tell myself to calm down. It's not that great. It's a fiction book. But as far as fiction books go, and as far as like God hauntedness goes and showing sin and all its kind of like reality, I mean, he really, and that's why I hope for his soul. You know, I hope this guy was tormented, troubled. I hope he's in purgatory, and pray for him. Say a prayer for him. Maybe like the most Catholic thing we can do in a Catholic class, pray for the repose of David Foster Wallace's soul. God has mercy upon him. Anyways, if you do read the book, I hope you enjoy it. Next week, last two classes, we are just going to finish up, and we're going to be asking constantly, right? How logical is what he's talking about? Let me say right now, let's finish on a logic note. The year of the tux medicated path, that's very logical, I think. That is very plumber's logic. A plumber could see, look around and say, I'm disgusted by the consumerism of our culture. I'm disgusted by the fact that you can't name a football stadium Kibbie Dome anymore. It has to be Bank Stadium. So why not? To me, that's a very logical thing, very plain stated logical thing that people are going to be naming years. We're no longer in the year of 2023. We're in the year of, you know, Ford, you know, auto body revival, whatever. So David Foster Wallace, after that, you know, long introduction to his work, and people in the room wondering, what are you talking about, long introduction? What I mentioned was, and again, this is all combined in YouTube on the stream, but I did classes on David Foster Wallace in the past. We are now recording live, as you see the timestamp of the YouTube video posted, April and then into May of 2024. But the classes, I did some things on him in 2023, and I thought that's a really great introduction. Like, that's very fair and that's good. So that first hour that we just got done watching on the tape is the introduction. Today, 2 classes to give us 3 total. We go to maple syrup number 303 total. We're talking about David Foster Wallace through the lens of 3 things. We are going to talk about Infinite Jest probably an hour or so from now on Wednesday in this class time. We'll finish with that. We're going to talk about his grand unfinished novel, The Pale King.
Pale King?
The Pale King.
Okay.
Like king and queen.
Okay.
About IRS workers.
Wow.
And first, though, I want to begin with, as promised, a very recent article. I'm trying to think when this article came out. I think it came out 2024. No, I know it came out 2024. I think it came out even like April 2024. It is entitled, He Misses Somebody He's Never Even Met. He misses somebody he's never even met. Published in Humanum, which can be found at humanumreview.com. Humanum, Issues in Family, Culture, and Science, Pontifical John Paul II Institute for Studies on Marriage and Family, Washington, D.C. The author is a Cistercian monk. Mm-hmm. You cannot be any more based than a Cistercian monk. It's impossible. These guys are the Jedi. These guys are the blank, 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 the class A alpha, the cream of the crop, whatever kind of the Catholic world, Catholic special forces. EDMUND WALDSTEIN. EDMUND WALDSTEIN of the Order of Cistercian Monks. He misses somebody he's never even met. That's the first thing we're going to do, is discuss his article. And in his article, there are 25 points, which, okay, I mean, what is this episode entitled? David Foster Wallace, a Catholic critical analysis and appreciation. So everything we're doing is talking about DFW through the lens of his would-be Catholicism. Why do I say that? I've already said that on the stream before, but for everyone in class today, He failed RCIA twice. How is that possible? How is it possible to fail RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults? That is the process by which, like if you're a Protestant, you come into becoming confirmed and you receive the first Holy Eucharist and first reconciliation, or maybe you're an atheist, you have to even be baptized. The way you come into full communion with the church. How is it possible to fail RCIA? I don't know. But I told everyone before we started the stream, I was talking to a priest, and he was like, shame on this other priest who told David Foster Wallace, you have too many questions. St. Thomas Aquinas made the best arguments ever for atheism. St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, a guy, again, who will never tire saying, Jesus Christ himself told him, you have written well of me, Thomas. What will you have for your reward? Nothing but you, Lord, he answers. St. Thomas Aquinas, this most devout Catholic, would make up non-straw man great arguments to the other side. No, if you want to really do an atheist argument, do like this or do that. This priest telling David Foster Wallace, oh, you have too many questions. Like Catholicism, we fear not the truth. The truth will set you free. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So it's very sad. Perhaps if he was in better hands, David Foster Wallace would have made his way into the church. Sadly, everyone knows this too. Whoever's watching this video might be a diehard fan of this man, of who I'm a huge fan too. I've already mentioned that many times earlier in this video. But who we can pray for his soul. God have mercy on him. Sadly committed suicide in 2008. He died at the age of 46. Committed suicide just like his main character in Infinite Jest, James Incandenza. A lot of parallels between Incandenza and the kind of genius of that story, troubled genius. Anyways, we're talking all about DFW through the lens of his would-be Catholicism. I think he is absolutely a Catholic writer, and I do not say this to claim this in a chauvinistic way. Remember, chauvinism, one of the most misunderstood words. It literally means extreme patriotism towards your own kind. That's why when people talk about chauvinism and male chauvinism, yeah, it means a guy who's just super misogynist, only cares about guys, right? But chauvinist just means you only care about your own kind. I'm not saying in a chauvinist way that David Foster Wallace is a Catholic writer, meaning I'm a Catholic, so and I like him, and so he's a Catholic writer. I think he's honestly a Catholic writer. If he was of a different persuasion, I would say that. I believe honestly, irrespective of my own beliefs, I am a devout practicing Catholic. Irrespective of that, 100%, I think it's true. He was a very Catholic writer. His most Catholic trait was showing the reality of sin, I think. G.K. Chesterton said, it's the most provable aspect of Christian doctrine, the fall. We live in a fallen world. He shows that very well. Shows a sense of wonder. He's just a fantastic writer. Beautiful, writer. Those of you that are believers, I'd highly encourage you, do pray for his soul. A very troubled man, very brilliant man, touched with a lot of talent. I am certain if there's two camps about him, as I mentioned earlier, that everything he wrote was garbage, postmodern nonsense, and others that he's the greatest writer of the past 50, 60, 100 years, I'm much more closer to that second camp than I am to the first. I'm not saying I'm all in that second camp, but closer to like some fan was heckling this NBA player. I think his name is Brian Scalabrine. I may be mispronouncing his name. Apologize if I do. But he was an NBA journeyman. Brian Scalabrine had played like five minutes a game. One of the worst players in the NBA, which means he's still one of the greatest players on planet Earth. But some guy was like heckling him, and Scalabrine turns to the fan. He's like, I'm a lot closer to LeBron than you are to me. And he's right. LeBron James, who's 100, you maybe were terrible. He's way closer to that guy than you're to him. I'm way closer to David Foster Wallace as the greatest writer of the 100 years than I am to the other side, that he's, not great. I'm not saying that he's the greatest, is he better than Ernest Hemingway? I might say no, I don't know. Is he better than Flannery O'Connor or Walker Percy? It's debatable for me. Chesterton, they're all in that conversation. So we're going to talk all about him and his would-be Catholicism. We're going to start with this article with He Misses Somebody He's Never Even Met by EDMUND WALDSTEIN, a Cistercian monk. And because he's a Cistercian, here is a few seconds, less than a minute, of Cistercian monk beer. All right, so, you know, Rochefort Trappist Ale, is that Cistercian? I mean, it's Trappist beer. Maybe. I apologize if it's not Trappist. I think it's, no, it is, it's 100% Trappist. It says on the bottle. I apologize if it's not Cistercian, but it's still cool to watch beer getting poured, I think. All right, he misses somebody he's never even met. I'm going to just read to you basically in some ways quotes from this thing, and let's talk about it. The human condition is always the same, but different ages aggravate different symptoms of it. One permanent element of the human condition, symptoms of which are aggravated by the conditions of our own age, is articulated very clearly in one of the famous endnotes to David Foster Wallace's novel, Infinite Jest. Wallace describes his character Howland Condenza as reflecting on his, quote, curious feeling that he goes around feeling like he misses somebody he's never even met. People talk about, a lot of great writers, all of us, that's our proof we're in this valley of tears. All of us like remember heaven. And again, this is not to fall into not just bad speculation, but heresy. I'm not saying, oh, because of predestination, past life. No, Catholics do not believe in anything like that. I'm saying that we remember, it's kind of imprinted in our very being of like, then remember would be the wrong word because it would imply, you know, pre-existence. We have this kind of taste constantly for heaven, and we realize it's not to be found on this earth, right? Augustine, our patron, Vandal Catholic, says, our hearts are restless till they rest in you. We have this nagging suspicion, this gnawing feeling. This is not all there is. We're made for something greater. That haunts so much of his work. Not just Infinite Jest, but Pale King, so much of his work. Point number 2. Being given to abstract thought, as so many of Wallace's characters are, Hal universalizes his feeling into the claim that, quote, we're all lonely for something we don't know we're lonely for. And to Hal, loneliness is the great transcendent horror. Point number 3, from which we're always trying to escape. This is point number 3. Remember, EDMUND WALDSTEIN, Order of Cistercians, Humanum, he misses somebody he's never met. All quotes from, not DFW, our focus, EDMUND WALDSTEIN talking about DFW. Point number 3. Wallace's characters seek innumerable ways of trying to escape their deep loneliness, plunging into anything which can make them forget the horror of, quote, excluded engagement in the self. Excluded engagement in the self. Our great debater, Father Gracjan Kraszewski, OP, Order of Preachers, Dominican, did a great job explaining, like, to be open to heaven is like have ourselves sprung up like this because we're always engaged in ourselves. We're all kind of focused on ourselves, right? The attempt to escape loneliness becomes a flight from the self, an attempt to find forgetfulness of self in diversion, pleasure, intoxication, business, or fanatical indignation. Quote, a flight from in the form of plunging into. Point number 5. In his final, unfinished novel, The Pale King, and that'll be the first novel that we discuss, Wallace describes the flight from the self as a symptom of the perennial problem of human finitude. The Pale King records a number of IRS agents stuck in an elevator, and one of them goes on a long rant about the problem of finitude. Time is always passing, and everything else is passing away with it like fuel and fire, never to return. Soon we will all be dead. Soon everyone who knows us, or even knows we exist, will also be dead. It will be as though we had never been. This causes a deep fear that no one ever really kind of thinks about. And Waldstein talks that Foster Wallace's novels are this investigation of this existentialism, this existential crisis of being, of self. And he says, going back to his earlier points, I'm on point number 7 now. These points are wholly arbitrary as always to my notes. Who cares? I care that you listening, people in class, take down the notes as they see fit for their own edification. The numbers are arbitrary. This fear is closely related to loneliness. If one does not matter, if one's very existence will be forgotten, then one is alone. That's why in the Infinite Jest, there's a beautiful scene at one point where a guy at the end of the book, it's a 1,000-page novel, is just standing, I think like in Boston Commons or something, and he's seeing if anyone will hug him. And he has a sign like, touch me, hug me. Like he's trying to break through this loneliness. And guess how many people touch him? I think literally 0, of course.
Right.
You're walking downtown, someone's like, give me a hug. Listen, buddy, please stay away from me as far as possible. I mean, this is this existential atomization, right? It's very kind of like present in his novels, but he's always playing with, I'm talking about DFW now, he's always playing with that idea of like, love God above all and love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22, 36 through 40, to love God above all and your neighbor as yourself is the greatest commandment. Mark 12, 28 through 34, and it's worth more than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. To love God above all, love neighbor as yourself. He talks about infinite justice in so many ways about what we worship and why. And blessed be God forever, how tragic and blasphemous when it's not God, but all this other stuff. And I'll talk about that in a second in Waldstein's article, when he says, you know, all of us worship something. It's a very obvious point. The goal, obviously, is to worship God. That's the right order to worship, the only proper worship. But a lot of us worship other things. And do we love our neighbor as ourselves? No. I think all of us kind of fall short of that goal, sadly. Waldstein. The medieval worldview which preceded this time had integrated the finite human being into an organic whole that included human society, nature, and supernatural forces. The universe was seen as finite, but an ordered whole, created by God, not an empty and different space. And so he goes on and says, like, maybe people feel this great existentialism, this existential crisis. Soon everyone will be dead. No one will remember me. I'd recede in nothingness. Because not only we've lost our faith, but we've lost all connections, both to God and to one another. So everything seems like random chemical reactions in an indifferent, meaningless universe. Waldstein says, the picture of that world we find, for example, in Dante's Commedia. Freaking yeah, with our last maple syrup episode, Dante's Divine Comedy. This ordered logos, the root for logic, but also the incarnate logos, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, the second person of the Holy Trinity, the incarnate word, teleologically ordering this whole. What is teleology? It's starting with the end in mind. A telos is a goal. The Christian life is inherently teleological, right? What is the point of being a Christian? The Catechism, the Old Baltimore Catechism says it. To know, love, and serve God in this world and be happy with him in the next. That's a telos, a goal. The whole goal of my life is to know, love, and serve God and be happy with him now and then forever in the next world. So all of the parts of the universe are bound together by a hierarchical order of governance working for the benefit of the whole, though disturbed by sin. So Waldstein says, teleological universe, that's the reality, not indifferent. But we recognize we've lost this. We recognize the reality of the fall. Disturbed by sin. David Foster Wallace's works are all about the disruption of sin. Showing the disruption, the reality of sin. Okay, so human beings in this old view were able to subordinate themselves to this order and thereby be unalone. The nobility of the human person in comparison to the whole, all of creation besides, was his ability to attain the good of the whole through knowledge and love and consciously subordinate himself to that whole. The ability to know the whole meant the human soul was immortal. It was now, we have this perfect logos structure, but once more, something that DFW does a great job showing. Read Infinite Jest if you want to see how do people act when all they care about is entertaining themselves, even unto death, and sin runs wild, and there is no sin though. Sin is invented. But why am I so sad? But sin's not real. Why am I depressed all the time? But it's not sin. Human persons, however, were seen, Waldstein says, as fallen through original sin. Sin, to some extent, alienated human persons from the cosmos and its creator and put them into a state of sadness. So, Waldstein is saying DFW's works about loneliness, encaged in self, are about the reality of our fallen nature and our fallen world. Thus, it was necessary for them to be healed and reconciled to God and his creation, and this is a central aspect of the redemptive work of Christ. Finitude was thus solved by the gift of eternal life, and loneliness by the reconciliation and communion of that life. Modern culture is schizoid, Wallace argues. Now it's Wallace speaking, DFW. Modern culture is schizoid. We know a near infinity of truths that contradict our immediate common sense experience of the world. For example, I know my love for my child is a function of natural selection, but I know I love him, and I feel and act on what I know. Therefore, this progress of mathematicized, like this kind of, not even mathematics, but kind of math as almost like a secular religion, mathematicized science has led to, quote, abstraction, schizophrenia, and slavery to technology and scientific reason. Yeah. Infinite Jest, a lot of his works are about digging into the reality of sin, a world caked over in a particular sin called abstracted schizophrenia, technological and scientific reason-based slavery. And in Infinite Jest, he talks about really enslaved kind of, not just to boredom and loneliness, but to our own just base desires. Drugs, the hookup culture. He talks about cartridges. Yeah, exactly. Infinite Jest is 96, but if the internet was what it was today, exactly, instead of cartridges and like Blockbuster and, you know, VHS tapes, it would just be streaming, you know, endless entertainment online, whatever. Okay, so back to Waldstein. Wallace was fascinated by advertising and continually described parody to analyze it in both his fiction and nonfiction. A good example of the subtle suggestion that the indulgence of infantile desires contributes to happiness occurs in the story, quote, Mr. Squishy, arguably Wallace's fullest exploration of the manipulative nature of advertising. A fictional snack company, Mr. Squishy, gives a new chocolate snack the name Felonies. The name is meant to suggest that happiness really consists in rebelling against the explicit notions of virtuous living current in society and imposed by the superego.
They call them what?
Felonies.
Oh,
felonies.
Yeah.
Crimes. This is brilliant. This is so Catholic. He's writing a story, not just criticizing society, but saying, look how satanic society has become. In the original satanic rebellion, what are the words of Lucifer when he's the light bearer, great angel, before he becomes Satan through his disobedience? I will not serve. So he's showing, even in base consumer desires, people will only buy your candy bar if it tells you, I will not serve. Hey, you're a real badass if you eat this candy. This candy's like being a felon. You're a badass. You're like, you know, a rebel without a cause. You're like James Dean, but more hard-edged than that. Right? So Mr. Squishy, what a hilarious name too, sells you felonies because what they're really selling you, what our disgusting schizoid culture is really selling you, is rebellion. Fake autonomy, stick it to the man, yeah. And he says, well, look what this world has given us. Look what that attitude has given us. On one hand, advertisers promote as the model of human life an ideal of physical fitness unattainable by sedentary office workers. So other corporations can market all kinds of diets, diet-friendly foods, exercise age, blah, blah, blah. And then on the other hand, corporations such as Mr. Squishy can take the opposite tack and promote self-indulgence. He was a huge critic of modern consumer culture. And he's like, they work hand in glove. Mr. Squishy sells you felony candy bars that make you feel like so tough when you're rebelling against the man that they get you really fat. And then Mr. Squishy's sub company, shell company, whatever on the side that works in partnership with them, that all work under one umbrella, sells you the treadmill. And, you know, and the treadmill company says, after you do the treadmill, don't you deserve a Mr. Squishy? You've worked hard today, you know? Okay. Wallace talks about a freedom of individual choice, ironically. The freedom in question is a fake freedom that amounts to a kind of slavery. The FW talks about his work, especially Infinite Jest. The freedom we think we have is really a form of self-imposed slavery. For Hal Incandenza, he's one of the main characters of Infinite Jest. Brilliant teenage kid, almost a senior, going to get a college scholarship to play at the University of Arizona, part of the Incandenza family, which is the main kind of family of Infinite Jest. For Hal, the ubiquity of the fakeness of advertising has led in American teenagers the cultivation of the attitude of irony and cynicism. But Hal recognized the attraction of this cynical attitude stems in large part from the fact that it is itself a fake means of escaping loneliness. Keep in mind that for kids and younger people, to be hip and cool is the same as to be admired and accepted and included and so unalone. Mm-hmm. Forget so-called peer pressure. It's more like peer hunger. So he's like, yeah, like the advertisers make something for me, Mr. Squishy, and I'm this really cool 16-year-old. That's so dumb. Corporations are, it makes kind of joke. While I'm wearing like a corporate shirt or something that, you know, like as I'm mocking it, I have to mock it. We've come to this culture of mocking and sarcasm. We're swimming in this and have been drowning in it since the post-World War I era and the Roaring '20s and the kind of disillusion, the great breaking event of the Great War. I have to sarcastically rip all this stuff while at the same time supporting the system. Like, to be hip and cool, I mock my parents, all these stupid boomers and blah, blah, all this kind of stuff, which I don't even believe. I just say that. That's cool. At the same time, I take all my cues from the same people that I'm supposedly mocking at the same time. Wallace talks about irony is the song of the caged bird that's come to love its cage. It's like, I'll trash talk how much I hate America now. America sucks. Well, then leave. Where else would you want to be? Well, I guess America. That kind of attitude, you know? Like, I guess I'll actually love everything about my life. I actually do like it, but it's not cool to not talk about it unironically. That's why one of the characters, Mario in Candenza, it's just so cool here, right? Is the only one that can escape the falsehood of this ironic sarcasm. Moreover, the ironic distance from the world closes off any avenue of escaping existential loneliness. A person can only speak of connection between persons, of love, of transcendence, or meaning in ironic mode. I love you, LOL. Great job today. I'm glad it turns out you don't suck, haha. I can't talk about serious stuff, that's my ironic joke, whatever, right? So Mario in Candenza, this character, Hal's special needs brother, completely lacks this ironic distance from the world. And he is disturbed by seeing it in others. He is puzzled that people cannot talk about deep emotions or about suffering or loneliness or God. Quote, it's like there's some rule that real stuff can only get mentioned if everyone rolls their eyes or laughs in a way that isn't happy. Isn't that so true? Like, Foster Wallace is the diagnostician. He diagnoses our stuff. I think just so incredibly amazing. The people in Ennet House. So I actually continue on here. Last 2 points. Mario felt both good times. He's in Ennet's house. Ennet House is, and we'll talk about this again in about an hour in the stream, when we talk about dive in an infinite jest. Ennet House is this halfway house in Boston. You know, 12-step program, recovering, especially I think Alcoholics Anonymous. There's also NA, Narcotics Anonymous. Don Gately is the main kind of figure. But anyways, Mario felt good both times in Ennet House because it's very real. People are crying and making noise and getting less unhappy. And once he heard someone say God with a straight face, and nobody looked at them or looked down or smiled any sort of where you could tell they were worried inside. The people in Ennet House say God with a straight face because they have come to the end of their tether and are willing to try anything to help them escape their addiction. They attend 12-step programs, which tell them they need to entrust themselves to a higher power. To the surprise of many of them, it works. I mean, he's about breaking the sin-laden, crusty irony of our society. And so to conclude, before we talk about Pale King, I agree so much with the Cistercian priest, what a legend, Waldstein. Quote, Wallace's deep insight into the human condition was indeed that we all go around missing someone who we have never met, lonely for the one for whom we have been estranged. And he saw the flight into diversion as a symptom of that loneliness, a symptom that leads now in our hypermodern culture to the same place it led the ancient Israelites, enslavement to false idols. The idols have different names and better marketing, but they are idols nonetheless. Yet Wallace's vagueness and hesitation about naming the one from whom we are estranged is a sign of how modernity aggravates our condition and makes it difficult even to name. It has been 15 years since Wallace's death by suicide. In those years, the world has only come to resemble his novels even more closely. He is the preeminent diagnostician of our crisis of meaning. And it's very beautiful, you know, that he can't even name God. He talks a lot about God in Infinite Jest, but he can't even name God. How sad that priest who couldn't bring him all the way home. He can't name the one to whom we are ultimately, estranged, the only one that could heal our pain and suffering. And in fact, it did in the full measure on Calvary, Jesus Christ. Wallace brings us to it's a very Catholic novel and Catholic works. He brings us to the doorstep of sin, and he's just waiting not to fail our CIA and get him through the door. To everyone who's been with us the whole time, now I guess in the whole stream getting close to like over 100 minutes, like an hour 40, probably have just as much left to go. We are at this point going to talk about The Pale King, his unfinished novel about IRS workers. I believe it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction in 2012. One of 3 selected for that. No one got the award that year. I don't get it.
What?
Yeah, the Pulitzer Prize committee had 3 books become like, bronze, silver, gold medal, podium, whatever. And said, these are the best 3. Well, ostensibly, you're going to pick one of them. No one got it. Anyways, he at that point, this is posthumously published. He dies in 2008. This comes out, I believe, in 2011.
Wow.
Again, what's the very Catholic point in The Pale King? What do we do with that loneliness, that estrangement? Can we find beauty in the quotidian everyday? This book is his Therese of Lisieux book. I believe. Therese of Lisieux talked about doing, remember, the Little Flower, this amazing saint, very modern saint. Therese of Lisieux, I believe, is 1873 to 97, almost lives into the 20th century. Therese of Lisieux, if you've never heard of her, do ordinary things with extraordinary love. Like The Little Way to Sainthood. This book's about the little way of the mind-breaking boredom of being an IRS agent. Speaking of, I got to start here on page 27. This is how boring the IRS is. Ready? From the Peoria Journal-Star, Monday, November 17, 1980. IRS worker dead for 4 days. Supervisors at the IRS Regional Complex in Lake James Township are trying to determine why no one noticed that one of their employees had been sitting dead at his desk for 4 days before anyone asked if he was feeling all right. He says he passes away and the office cleaner finally finds him. Mr. Bloomquist's supervisor, Scott Thomas, said Frederick was always the first guy in each morning and the last guy to leave at night. He was very focused and diligent, so no one found it unusual that he was in the same position all the time and didn't say anything. He was always absorbed in his work and kept to himself. So the IRS is so boring. A guy dies at his desk and is just sitting there and no one even notices. They're so abstracted into their own encaged loneliness. It's like, whatever. It's not even just, he's a hard worker. I don't know. The book has a very, very beautiful intro. And if you're wondering, like, are you just going to read us excerpts? Yeah, I am. I think that's great. That's the best way to kind of get at an author. Is I've already done way enough analysis. I gave you an hour of Infinite Jest, me talking about it, what the book is about. I gave you probably half an hour of Waldstein, the Cistercian priest, author, talking about his take on enough analytics. I just want to go straight to the source. The remainder hour and a half of Pale King and Infinite Jest is basically just reading from the books. Let me just read you the first chapter of how this book opens up. He was a fantastic stylist. Why is David Foster Wallace the final class of beauty in this maple syrup history run of this year? Because he talks about God even without naming his name, as Waldstein says, shows us that all of us have that. Our hearts are restless, they rest in you, Augustinian, Therese of Lisieux, Little Way, all that stuff. He's also a beautiful writer. He's also an incredible writer. So let's listen to this opening paragraph. This is about a plane coming in to central Illinois. Past the flannel plains and backdrop graphs and skylines of canted rust, and past the tobacco-brown river overhung with weeping trees and coins of sunlight through them on the watered-down river, to the place beyond the windbreak, where untilled fields simmer shrilly in the AM heat, shattercane, lamb's quarter, cut grass, sawbriar, nutgrass, jimson weed, wild mint, dandelion, foxtail, muscadine, spine cabbage, goldenrod, creeping Charlie, butterprint, nightshade, ragweed, wild oat, vetch, buttergrass, invaginate volunteer beans, all heads gently nodding in a morning breeze like a mother's soft hand on your cheek. An arrow of starlings fired from the windbreak's thatch. The glitter of dew that stays where it is and steams all day, a sunflower, four more, one bowed, and horses in the distance standing rigid and still as toys, all nodding. Electric sounds of insects at their business. Ale-colored sunshine and pale sky and whirls of cirrus so high they cast no shadow. Insects, all business, all the time. Quartz and chert and schist and chondrite iron scabs and granite. Very old land. Look around you. The horizon, trembling, shapeless. We are all of us brothers. And just trying to just get at once more some of this idea, of overcoming loneliness or being marooned in loneliness. How do we escape this existential human condition? I am single, and single men are the ones in the service that get reposted the most. Any repost is a hassle for personnel. Reposting a family is worse. Plus, you have to offer incentives for people with families to move. It's a treasury reg. If you're single, though, you stop even unpacking. It's hard to meet women in the service. It's not the most popular. There's a joke. Can I tell it? You meet a woman you like at a party. She goes, "What do you do?" You go, "I'm in finance." She goes, "What kind?" You go, "Sort of a type of accounting." It's a long story. She says, "Oh, for who?" You go, "The government." She goes, "City, state?" You go, "Federal." She goes, "Oh, what branch?" You go, "U.S. Treasury." On it goes, narrowing down. At some point, she figures it out what you're dancing around, and she's gone. But you're an IRS agent. I know, he's great. I tell you, if anyone picks this up, you will love him. 115. It was either on the Twilight Zone or Outer Limits, one of those. A claustrophobic guy who gets worse and worse until he's so claustrophobic that he starts screaming and carrying on, and they trundle him off to a mental asylum. And in the asylum, they put him in isolation, a straitjacket in a tiny little room with a drain in the floor, a room the size of a closet, which you can see would be the worst thing possible for a claustrophobic. But they explained to him through a slit in the door that it's rules and procedures. That if somebody's screaming, they have to get put in isolation. Hence, the guy's damned. He's in there for life. Because as long as he's screaming and trying to beat himself unconscious against the wall of the room, they're going to keep him in that little room. He's a living example of how there has to be some slack or play in the rules and procedures for certain cases. Or else, sometimes there's going to be some ridiculous foul-up and someone's going to be caught in a living hell. The episode is even called Rules and Procedures, and none of us ever forgot that. So it's part of, like, I guess, like an IRS training video.
Can you imagine spending your whole career trying to understand nonsense material?
The crazy, I mean, David Foster Wallace went, spent a year working for the IRS, like in the 80s. A lot of his work is, I would not call it semi-autobiographical, but we all write from experience. Ernest Hemingway said, write what you know. Shout out to my mother, Alexandra Kraszewski. She's an accountant. She retired recently after a long and storied career. Brilliant woman. I don't just say it because she's my mom and I love her. That's true. Both those things are true, but just amazing mathematical mind. David Foster Wallace had this kind of like accounting and just rules and procedures and bureaucratic firsthand experience working in an IRS office, like as a 23-year-old. He himself was in a halfway house for a while when he was caught up in drugs and all the kind of stuff, which he really talks a lot about in Infinite Jest. Infinite Jest is set around a tennis academy. He was a nationally ranked junior tennis player. You know, excellent person you think has, you know, possible pro potential down the line. So a lot of the stuff, you know, he puts into from his own experience. Pale King. Our house is outside of the city, one of the blacktop roads. We had us a big dog that my daddy would keep on a chain in the front yard, a big part German Shepherd. I hated the chain, but we didn't have a fence, and we were right off the road there. The dog hated that chain, but he had dignity. What he'd do, he'd never go out to the length of the chain. He never even got out to where the chain got tight, even if the mailman pulled up or a salesman. Out of dignity, the dog pretended like he chose this one area to stay in that just happened to be inside the length of his chain. Nothing outside of that area there, right there interested him. He just had zero interest. So he never noticed the chain. He didn't hate it, the chain. He just up and made it not relevant. Maybe he wasn't pretending. Maybe he really up and chose that little circle for his own world. He had a power to him. All of his life on that chain. I loved that damn dog. That's really, again, no further comments. Fantastic writing. In the book, once more, a lot of these Catholic connections. The inspiration for this main character is taking a tax class at DePaul University, a Jesuit university in Chicago, with a Jesuit priest. That's how he gets involved. And the Jesuit priest basically in some way, now, ora et labora, prayer and work, is the motto of the Benedictines, not the Jesuits. But all Catholic religious orders, Catholicism writ large, have this idea of praying and working. The Jesuit basically, you know, teaches him the beauty of this love of numbers and whatever. So, here it is. Here's how this guy gets involved. During an entirely different DePaul class, one I was not even really taking, but sort of bumbled in through an inattentive screw-up during the final review period just before spring break, and was so dramatically moved and affected by that, I barely even studied for my regular course's final exam. Though this time, not out of carelessness or sloth, but because I decided I had some very important, sustained, concentrated thinking to do after the dramatic encounter with the substitute Jesuit in advanced tax, which was the class I've mentioned sitting in on by mistake. So this main character, this future IRS agent, sits in on this class by mistake and it changes his life. He discovers his very Catholic word vocation for, you'll hear this in a second, back to the text. The fact is, talk about people being called to something, called to the priesthood, called to marriage. The fact is there are probably just certain kinds of people who are drawn to a career in the IRS. People who are, as the substitute father said that final day in advanced tax, called to account. Some people are called to account, to the vocation of accounting, to the vocation of mountains of paperwork, all that. So anyways, I highly recommend you read The Pale King. We didn't go over it. I read you like 5 excerpts. But I really want to transition next in our video to talking in full measure about Infinite Jest and give that as well, full accounting. Come on. This episode already of Maple Syrup History is going to be, and you already know what it is watching now on YouTube, 3 or 4 hours long. How am I going to go over a 1,000-page book in a short time? I'm not, but I'm going to do, if I gave you 5 or 6 excerpts of The Pale King, I'm going to read you 75 or so excerpts of Infinite Jest. But before I do, I have one more thing to do. One thing in between, think of a little halftime between Pale King and Infinite Jest. Stuff?
Yeah, get them the stuff and then let them.
So guys, to close out today's class, because remember, it's 3 parts total, that first hour long. If you're like, you seem like even a year later, you're wearing the same sweatshirt and it's got a hole in it. I aim to wear the same sweatshirt for the final class too. Okay. Have it be all Kansas Jayhawks all the way. Am I a KU fan? No. But you're from Kansas? Nah. I just have the sweatshirt. It's got a real sweet Jayhawk emblazoned here. It's completely disheveled and discombobulated, but it's very comfortable. I wore it for the episode last year, which is part 1 of the stream. Part 2, part 3, I aim to do the same. To close out day 2, remember we've covered a lot. People in class live and just watching later too, we've covered a long hour-long introduction to the man in Infinite Jest. Basically, beautiful thing from Waldstein, that article discussing just the kind of like loneliness at the heart of his works, and excerpts from Pale King. All we have left to do is next class close with a full investigation, or pretty thorough investigation of Infinite Jest. I want to close with, in this halftime period, David Foster Wallace's famous commencement address at Kenyon College. Very famous liberal arts school. Wallace is already a superstar at this point. He becomes a superstar in 1996, the publication of Infinite Jest. This is 2005, 3 years before his death. At this point, he's a professor out in Pomona in California. I think at this commencement address, he talks about, like, does that story that I like repeating often, the 2 fish swimming in the water, and one turns to the other, how's the water today? And the one says, what's water? You know, the lack of awareness. You can't see the forest from the trees, right? You're so deep in your métier. It can be good or bad. How awesome would we say, what's holiness? Because you're so full of holiness. You're so Matthew 5:48, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. I don't even recognize I'm acting holy. I'm just being. Praise God. That'd be good, you know, ignorance to your circumstances. Of course, it might mean as well the very negative stuff that he brings out in Infinite Jest. I'm just so focused on the entertainment. Remember, the whole Infinite Jest is a movie that James Incandenza, this brilliant guy, makes that is so entertaining, it kills you when you watch it. You watch it until you forget to eat and breathe, and you die. And the whole part of Infinite Jest is disseminating this movie as a weapon of mass destruction. So perhaps the fish in that movie, you know, you've been on the TV a lot today. Have I really? Yeah, it's been 13 hours. Maybe that's, you know, that part of kind of lack of awareness too. I'm just going to read to you a very small excerpt of his Kenyon address. I think they made it into a little chapbook, and you can find that online certainly. But David Foster Wallace, Kenyon College, 2005. Here, the author is simply speaking and, in a sense, instructing as you do in a commencement address, hopefully bequeathing some wisdom and knowledge to the audience. Not part of his book's commencement address. Because here's something else that's true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you will feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, afraid, always on the verge of being found out. That is profound. Mm-hmm. All he's missing there, and I want to pray for his soul daily, all he's missing there is, because you must seek God alone, because only in God will you find fulfillment. Or as St. Augustine said, who would have thunk it? Augustine of Hippo, super OG, going way back in time. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Able to finish it. That's legit. That's so cool. That's awesome. Guys, welcome back. We're still on this one stream. If you're watching this on YouTube later, it's a 3-hour episode or more. Or maybe only got to 240. I have no idea because I'm doing this in real time right now. I don't know how long we're going to go today. But without belaboring the point, this has been all about a Catholic critical analysis of David Foster Wallace. And as promised, the first hour of our stream was talking about his biography and just talking about Infinite Jest. Today, and check this out, before I had the blue book version of it. Now I have this white one, 20th anniversary edition, and it's taped as well, which is, I think that's cool. We're just going to go through, I have 6 sections to take you through. I'm just going to read to you stuff from his book. And again, I've said enough. I'll say it a final time, but he writes about God-hauntedness, that Augustinian, our hearts are restless, they rest in you, and the reality of a world steeped in sin that is denying its sin and entertaining itself to death. Remember, this book is called Infinite Jest because the genius auteur in this book, James Incandenza, founder of the Enfield Tennis Academy. Ennet House is the halfway house. The Enfield Tennis Academy. He's also this brilliant avant-garde filmmaker, and he makes Infinite Jest, this cartridge, this film that is so enticing, so seductive, you die when you watch it. And so throughout the book, different people, including a group of Quebecois separatist wheelchair assassins, are trying to find this cartridge and disseminate it. And the Incandenza family is involved, etc., whatever. And so there's a great point within the point there of, yeah, he's writing about American society literally in 1996, almost Y2K. You know, watching Friends and Seinfeld on the couch until it just passes out, entertaining itself to death, very much like our Netflix culture today. So without further ado, that's why, again, we are studying him, or closing our beauty class with him. I hope, God willing, this is now number 303 of Maple Syrup History. This whole episode has been 301, 2, and 3. I hope there's 7,000 episodes left of Maple Syrup History. It's the final class of beauty, spring 2024. He's also a very funny and beautiful writer. So without further ado, just excerpts and analysis the whole time. First thing to give you a hint in this book. During that last pre-subsidized year, after each tournament's perfunctory final, at the little post-final award presentations and dance, Eric Clipperton would attend unarmed and eat maybe a little shaved turkey from the buffet and mutter out of the side of his slot-like mouth to Mario Incandenza, attend unarmed. So, Eric Clipperton is a tennis player. You guys know Eric Clipperton? What is his story? Eric Clipperton is a tennis player who plays tennis with a gun to his head. And he tells his opponent, if I lose, I'm going to shoot myself. So he's never lost the game because of that. And so they say that since his Glock 9mm and public intentions were instantly legendary, he was regarded by the USTA, United States Tennis Association, as having never had a legitimate victory or even a legit match in sanctioned play. He literally blackmails his opponent. Okay, we're playing tennis. If I lose, 15 love, if I lose, I'm going to shoot myself. This book literally, through this one character of 1,000, is precisely like that. I hope that I can entice you as with the Pale King, just to read it for yourself, right? What do I mean by pre-subsidized time? Well, he's talking about, again, right, being in a time in American history where everything has become so hyper-commercialized and so sold out that even the years are sponsored. So here is chronology on page 223, and I believe both this white cover edition, the blue, there's a hardcover, also blue with like clouds. I believe all of the copies have the same page numbers. I think they're all, I've seen a couple different copies and own multiple ones, and they're the same. So it should be 223 in every version of the book. Chronology of organization of North American nations' revenue-enhancing subsidized time by year. So here are the years. It's no longer, let's say 1999. It is the year of the Whopper. The next year, year of the Tux medicated pad. Year 3, year of the trial-sized Dove bar. Number 4, year of the Purdue Wonder Chicken. Number 5, year of the Whisper Quiet Maytag Dishmaster. 6, year of the Ushitsu 2007 Mimetic Resolution Cartridge View Motherboard easy to install upgrade for Infotron/interlace TP systems for home office or mobile. Number 7, year of dairy products from the American heartland. Number 8, year of the Depend adult undergarment. 9, year of glad. This year of glad, FYI, and we'll talk about that over the course of this remaining hour or so, however long we have. If you note, or I ask you to please do note, if you ever read this book, the book ends on page 981, actually reading it. Subsequent to that are about 120 pages of footnotes.
They're really important.
They're really important. Thank you, Betsy Johnson. Yeah, you do not skip over the footnotes. I mean, you'll be completely in the dark. The actual page total here, the last numbered page listed in this book is 1079. Okay, so what is 90? That's 98 pages of footnotes at the back end. And the book ends on page 981, but really the first 16 pages are the end of the book. Because you'll see as you go through, again, I guess, sorry, spoiler alerts for anyone. I'm going to spoil not everyone. I won't tell you where they find Infinite Jest. I'm not going to talk about John Wayne, this amazing tennis player with the same name as the famous. I'm not going to talk about everything, but spoilers, right? The book opens up on page 3 with Year of Glad.
Okay.
So remember, in terms of subsidized time, and I believe it's those 16 pages are the only time we have Year of Glad for the entire book.
The audiobook is 56 hours and 12 minutes long.
The audiobook is 56 hours and 12 minutes long. Do you know who reads it? Is it?
Sean Pratt.
Sean Pratt. Dang, I gotta find out who Sean Pratt is. Gotta have him on Maple Syrup History. Sean, how was it like reading 56 hours? Did you do it all at once? Did you pull double all-nighter? That's pretty impressive. All right, guys. Okay, so that gives us a kind of good. Again, if a lot of this is going to be kind of confusing today, again, anyone watching on the episode, and now 2 hours in, it's not. We've talked about the whole schematic. That's what's so fun about having that long form layout. It's not confusing in that way. And I told you what we're just reading is basically snippets about the Augustinian whole. The whole all of us have inside that we try to fill with entertainment and whatever. And our hearts are rest, they rest in you, and the sin. But if it, despite all that, is kind of random and confusing, that's postmodernity. This is the postmodern book par excellence. Like the book, I'm going to read it right now. Listen to the actual last words of the book. Okay? It will be someone blue-collar and unlicensed, though inevitably a nurse's aide with quick bit nails, a hospital security guy, a tired Cuban orderly who addresses me as Jew, who will, looking down in the middle of some kind of bustled task, catch what he sees as my eye and ask, "So yo then, man, what's your story?" That's the actual end of the book. That's the actual end of the Year of the Depend adult undergarment, page 17. We're back in earlier subsidized time. To really spoil it, Hal, who is the grand tennis prodigy, Hal Incandenza, he's getting vetted if he's going to be worthy of his athletic scholarship to play tennis for the Arizona Wildcats, which actually already is kind of a disappointment for Hal, because this book, remember, takes place at Enfield Tennis Academy, is a main focal point, Ennet Rehab Drug House. The Wheelchair Quebecois Assassins are a main group. The Incandenza family is the main kind of overarching familial anchor. Hal Incandenza, this high school kid, throughout the whole book, he's 14, 15, 16, 17. In the Year of Glad, he's 18 or 19. He's that last year, he's graduated this elite boarding school tennis academy, and he's going to go play Division I, at that time Pac-10, now it'd be Pac-12. Now the Pac-12 dissolved, it's Pac-2 now. But, Pac-10, Arizona Wildcats tennis. Why was that already kind of disappointing for Hal? Because the best players at the Enfield Tennis Academy, like the already mentioned, who I'm not going to talk about at all today, but John Wayne, who's #1 boys guy, they go pro immediately. They're on the ATP tour, all that kind of stuff. So it's already kind of a step down for Hal, Hal's always kind of throughout the book portrayed as kind of one step below greatness. Like John Wayne sets the pace for the whole school. He's the #1 guy, this Canadian guy. And that is the last kind of chronological line that is thrown to us across the abyss that is this grand postmodern book. So, once more, just diving right back into stuff, let me take you to the next section of high import. David Foster Wallace, in 1996, predicted the presidency of Donald Trump. I promise, I hate Trump, I love Trump, no comment. I really make it a strong promise. The only thing that I ever want to put my name to is I'm a devout Catholic, God have mercy on me, God help me. I am not left, right, whatever. I would never want to influence people. So this is not going to be, look how awesome Trump is or look how bad Trump is. It's not a compliment or an insult. It's just a fact. He kind of predicted this former reality star type persona. There's no question, I believe. Donald Trump was famous long before The Apprentice, but that really kind of made Trump amongst a recent generation of voters in 2016 especially. Trump's, you're fired kind of public persona. So listen, page 382. The motionless face on the screen is Johnny Gentle, third-party stunner. Johnny Gentle, the first U.S. president ever to swing his microphone around by the cord during his inauguration speech, whose new white-suited Office of Unspecified Services retinue required inauguration attendees to scrub and mask and then walk through chlorinated foot baths at public pools. He's also a germaphobe, Johnny Gentle. Johnny Gentle, managing somehow to look presidential in a Fukushima microfiltration mask, whose inaugural dress heralded the advent of a tidier nation, who promised to clean up government and trim fat and sweep out waste and hose down our chemically troubled streets, and asleep darn little until he fashioned a way to rid the American psychosphere of the unpleasant debris of a throwaway past. To restore the majestic ambers and purple fruits of a culture, he now promises to rid of the toxic effluvia choking away highways and littering our byways and grunging up our sunsets and cruddying those harbors in which televised garbage barges lay stacked up at anchor, clotted and impotent amid undulating clouds of pot-bellied gulls and those disgusting blue-bodied flies that live on shit. First U.S. president to ever say shit publicly. Rusty old barges cruising up and down petroleated coastlines, laying up reeky and stacked, emitting CO as they wait the opening of new landfills and toxic repositories that people demanded in every area but their own. What am I talking about? So, it's actually great. I love this. In a 1,079-page book, we're going to get the whole book pretty tight right now. Ready? Remember, a genius artist, filmmaker guy, James Incandenza, who's also the founder of Enfield Tennis Academy, him and his wife, Avril. Avril is the mom figure, literally her sons, Hal and Hal's brother, Oren. Oren is a complete scumbag. Oren is Hal's brother who discovers randomly, and we'll read it, that he has a great talent for punting footballs, and he becomes an NFL punter. He's absolutely, remember, talking about sin with no restraint, Oren's favorite thing to do was to go out on a date with a girl, and in the middle of that date, excuse himself and go hook up with a different girl, and then come back to that date with that girl. Like absolute womanizing, hedonist. That's Oren Incandenza, one of the sons, Hal's older brother. The other brother, remember, is kind of the beating heart, Dostoevsky's idiot kind of character, Mario. Idiot, by the way, being a high compliment. If you've ever read the book Idiot by Dostoevsky, it's about this prince who's too good for this world. Sorry?
Repeatedly.
You've read it repeatedly?
Yes.
Tell me, do you agree that Idiot is a beautiful book? Yes or no?
Yes.
Why do you think it is? I think it is. Why do you think it is?
Oh dear. I had my book group ladies read it and they all hated it.
Shame on them. I had my book ladies read it, they all hated them. Shame on them.
So made it a good book.
In The Idiot, this character, right? He is too good for this world. He's ridiculous, naive, and he's just trying to live like Christ loved, like purely and beautifully. And it's like Dostoevsky shows, also a great diagnostician of sin, that the world can't handle goodness, right? The ultimate goodness came, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and we killed him, right? The world can't handle goodness. So there's 3 Incandenza brothers. James is the father, founds Enfield Tennis Academy with his wife Avril, who all the boys call the moms. It's like a running joke throughout the thing, the moms. And after Incandenza dies, by killing himself by putting his head in a microwave, the moms, Avril, is going to run the Enfield Tennis Academy along with Charles Tavis. This figure that I'm blanking now, but is somehow related to Hal in some way. I think he's like an uncle or something. But they're going to run Enfield Tennis Academy. James and Candenza founded the tennis academy, Averill's wife, 3 boys, main character Hal, for whom the story ends. So what's your story, man? Talk about more about him in a second. He's kind of the main character. Mario, his special needs brother, who's the real beautiful saint figure of the thing. If it's like Brothers K, Dostoevsky stuff, like he's the good, you know, was it Aloysia in that story? I'm also blanking. Who's the good brother in Brothers K? Is it anyone know? So we need to get our Russian experts on here. But Mario represents, I think the idiot is actually maybe the better example than Brothers K of someone who is too good for this world. Where Oren, again, is the ultimate hedonist, giving into everything, every one of his kind of instantaneous pleasures, NFL punter by accident. Now, but, right, James made this movie. He's also an avant-garde filmmaker. He made this movie that is so entertaining, it's a weapon of mass destruction, and when you watch it, you die. Called The Entertainment, called truly Infinite Jest, from which the book takes its title. You got all that, and there's a drug house and wheelchair assassins. What is this stuff here? Clotted and impotent among undulating clouds, the U.S. has become like a massive dumping ground. It's amazing. Like the book, it's so subtle in a certain sense. First of all, the U.S. is no longer the U.S., but something called ONAN, Organization of North American Nations, which as well, you know, onanism, right? Onanism, masturbation. I mean, it's very well done. Like any Christian will tell you, Catholic, Protestant, all Christian denominations, masturbation is wrong. It is wrong to be kind of turned in on oneself. That's how brilliant this book is as a diagnosis of sin. That even the country is named, you know, masturbation. That could be named like in the literal, visceral sense of that, or like that's what Netflix is. If you neglect all of your things, you sit there, you know, watching the whole time for your own pleasure kind of thing. So Johnny Gentle is the president of ONAN, the Organization of North American Nations, and there are massive like dumping grounds of garbage everywhere, with which he is particularly concerned, right? Somehow managing to look presidential in a Fukushima microfiltration mask. So he's like, I'm not saying here he's predicting COVID at all, but like he's wearing a mask for his inauguration. But he's also swinging the thing. He's a former like Las Vegas performer, you know, whatever. So while all this is going on, the tennis academy, the search for Infinite Jest, the Quebecois wheelchair guys want to find it because they want to overthrow ONAN. We know when this book was published in '96, the Quebecois almost seceded from Canada. There was a referendum that failed like 52 to 48 to have Quebec break away from Canada. It almost went through. So that's all the background. If you know that, like, you know, now we're probably like about 2 hours into the stream. I think when I saw it, I put these things piece by piece before I publish it, because obviously the files are very large. Before we started today's stream, which is part 3, it's one integral whole, obviously, but I had like an hour 45, so probably like 2:05 on the YouTube stream. See ya, goodbye, you know, thanks. You can skip the last hour, like we're just reading excerpts. That's the whole story. It's the search for this weapon of mass destruction's film that symbolizes what all of America's become, just sitting in a couch, staring at the TV, forgetting anything else, even if we die, dying for pleasure and hedonism while we search for God. But like Waldstein said, we don't even know we're searching for God. He misses someone he can't even name, right? We don't even know what the hole is that will satisfy. You know, our hearts are restless, they rest in you. Who is you? We don't even, America's jettisoned all faith. We'll just watch another episode of Friends kind of attitude. That's the whole story here. So that's what he means here about all this kind of stuff. The garbage and everything. So continuing on here, listen to some of these headlines from Johnny Gentle's presidency. Ukraine, 2 more Baltic states apply for NATO inclusion. Wow. This is 1996. The same thing's going on now with Ukraine, Russia, whatever, right? Gentle on waste storage from dismantled NATO therms. Not in my nation, babe. U.S.-Canadian support doomed NATO summit from start. Icelandic poll declares. Burger King's Pillsbury awarded rights to New Year. Header, Pizza Hut's PepsiCo files bid rigging complaint with IRS. Calendar and pre-printed check industry stock soar. ONAN pact penned. These are all just like him just free listing in the middle of the book, page 390, the different headlines, giving you all the context of how the country came to be as it is. He mentions here in the middle of this, page 397, if Infinite Jest is James Incandenza's masterpiece, and it is. I mean, it's his ultimate. It's a thing that might end all the North American alliance. Maybe his most famous film, you know, and obviously I'm saying this now almost like too serious. This is all fiction. He's not a real filmmaker, right? Maybe his most, like, you can't find this on IMDb or whatever. These aren't real movies. But his most famous film in the book is The Joke. You are strongly advised not to shell out money to see this film. And it's an amazing parody on the pretentiousness of like Berkeley types. Listen, The Joke's total running time was just exactly as long as there is even one cross-legged patron left in the theater to watch his own huge projected image gazing back down at him with the special distaste of a disgusted, ripped-off feeling art film patron. So the movie is, the joke is, you sit down and the projector flips on a live feed of everyone sitting in the theater. So you pay $20 to watch a movie, and then everyone slowly leaves, and it doesn't click off till the last person like quits. So sometimes the joke runs for 20 minutes, sometimes it goes on for 9 hours. Someone's just sitting there, when's the movie gonna start? Popping the popcorn. That's it. More headlines.
Well, it'd be better now because the movie theaters have those recliners now.
Now you can just, joke's on them. I got this, you know, like a nice night in a hotel. Yeah, totally.
You're in luxury, it doesn't matter what's on the screen.
Well said. Well said. Exactly. Exactly. More headlines. Freak Statue of Liberty accident kills Fed engineer. Header. Brave man on crane crushed by 5-ton cast iron burger. So the Statue of Liberty, America is sold out so bad in this Onan phase, they've changed the Statue of Liberty to be holding a burger instead of a torch because it's Year of the Whopper in subsidized time, and it kills a guy. It falls on one of these workers. Now, speaking of these like these uninhabitable areas of America, right? My baby has 6 eyes and basically no skull. Lurid color, 32-point tabloid headline, Dateline, Lancaster, New Hampshire. Gentle declares all U.S. territory north of line from Syracuse to Ticonderoga, New York. Ticonderoga, New York to Salem, Massachusetts federal disasters. Gentle declares all territory north of the line from Syracuse to Ticonderoga and Ticonderoga to Salem, Massachusetts federal disasters, offers federal aid for upstate and New England residents wishing to relocate. Claims funds for EPA cleanup, quote, are not within the map of what's possible. So America is like a massive wasting dump. And by the way, he's trying to pawn this off on Canada. Gentle to Canadian PM. Have some territory. Canadian PM to Gentle. No, really, thanks anyways. Gentle to Canadian PM, but I insist. Gentle to PM. Look, babe, take the territory or you're going to be really, really sorry. Now, this is the funniest line in the whole book on page 407. This is the funniest line in all of Infinite Jest. Gentle has completely lost mind, claims confidant, OUS Chief Tyne at press conference. Threatens to detonate upside-down missiles in U.S. silos. Willing to eliminate own map out of sheer pique if Canada nixes reconfigurative transfer of aesthetically unacceptable terrain. So, Gentle is going to detonate nukes upside down in U.S. silos to whatever, his own territory, if Canada doesn't take this garbage dump. All right, guys, so just skipping around, that first section, really, Johnny Gentle, Onan, Incandenza, subsidized time, that's a great, maybe like, again, see you, bye, like, go read the book now. But continue on, page 63, they give some information on Incandenza's father, who's kind of who pushes him to get in tennis in the first place. The father, progressively crippled by obsessions with death by spider bite, and by stage fright, and with a bitterness of ambiguous origin but consuming intensity towards the method school of professional acting and its more promising exponents. A father who somewhere around the nadir of his professional fortunes apparently decided to go down to his raid-sprayed basement workshop and build a promising junior athlete, the way other fathers might restore vintage autos or build ships in sized bottles or like refinish chairs. So like his father pushes James Incandenza. His father would be the grandfather of Mario, Oren, and Hal, into getting involved in tennis in the first place. And so then James Incandenza marries this woman, Avril Incandenza. She's the mom's. She becomes headmistress of ETA. Here's how she's described. She's 6'5". Very tall woman. I mean, this kind of woman should be a basketball center, an incredible volleyball player. The tall, ungainly, socially challenged, and hard drinking Dr. Incandenza's May-December marriage to one of the few bona fide bombshell females in North American academia, the extremely tall and high-strung, but also extremely pretty and gainly and teetotaling and classy Dr. Avril Mondragon, the only female academic ever to hold the MacDonald Chair in Perspective Usage at the Royal Victoria College of McGill University, whom Incandenza had met at a Toronto conference on reflective versus reflexive systems, was rendered even more romantic by the bureaucratic tribulations involved in obtaining an exit and then entrance visa, to say nothing of a green card for even a U.S. spoused Professor Mondragon, whose involvement, however demonstrably nonviolent, with certain members of the Quebecois separatist left while in graduate school, had placed her name on the notorious Personnes à qui on doit surveiller attentivement list. People who we have to follow closely. People who we must survey. People upon whom we must place close watch surveillance. The birth of the Incandenza's first child, Orrin, had been at least partly a legal maneuver. All right, so this kind of green card marriage, whatever, yeah. This book is so grimy. It's so about sin. It's so about sin. Avril, the headmistress, whose husband kills himself by putting his head in a microwave. James, he's called himself throughout the book, by the way, too. The kids call Avril the moms. They call James himself instead of dad. Just they refer to him like in this weird kind of way. It's very kind of like, he really well portrays kind of this very dysfunctional family. Avril starts having an affair with John Wayne at some point in the book, who's like this 19-year-old kid. It's just, there's everything, every kind of like lack of the cardinal virtues, lack of temperance, and lack of any type of restraint runs wild in this book, which once more is absolutely what happens when you are submerged in sin but can't even name it, and you can't name the way out. That's exactly what this book is. That's why, and again, along the way, it's so beautifully, like I said, so beautifully written. It's so funny. Every page has like laugh out loud parts. But yeah, it does a great job of kind of showing that run wild. You're wondering why I'm flipping through every once in a while. I've like benoted this book, notarized this book to like absolutely bonkers, hyper bunker level. But I got to find these pages. It takes a while to flip through, right? So that's why I feel like, I don't mean to pause randomly. Page 81. After himself dies, Dr. Charles Tavis, and here it is, either Mrs. Incandenza's half-brother or adopted brother, took down the Latin motto and substituted this is for the tennis academy, the Enfield Tennis Academy. Charles Tavis makes the boring motto for the academy be this: the man who knows his limitations has none. Blah, right? Gross. What was himself, James Incandenza's maker of infinite jest, what was his motto? Te occidere possunt, sed te edere non possunt nefas est. They can kill you, but the legalities of eating you are more dicey. Like, it's something like, imagine play tennis with that idea. Like, they might kill me, but they're gonna have to eat me. It's just so.
Give you the translation in there, doesn't it? Okay, good.
That's it. Yeah, the translation literally is, they can kill you, but the legalities of eating you are much more dicey.
You ever read something with all these little foreign language snippets with
no translation? Yeah, it's like, thank you for nothing. Yeah, for all of these 100%. Yeah. So actually, let's even like test this right now. So, and let's see how good my memory was with this. So yeah, it's footnote 32 on page 81. Let's go there and see what the literal translation is. Again, I think it's like, they can kill you, but eating you is more difficult legally, something like that. Let me see. Footnote number 32. And some of these footnotes, yeah, some footnotes are like one sentence long. Some are like 20 pages long. Remember, it's 98 pages of footnotes. Yeah, here it is, literally. Roughly, quote, they can kill you, but the legalities of eating you are quite a bit dicier. That's what the Latin motto, te occidere possunt sed te edere non possunt nefas est, which was the cool Latin motto of the academy before CT. Charles Tavis comes in and makes it blah. And the guy, they had this German guy who's this kind of like a real intense, hard driving, classic German guy called Stitt. And he talks about his training facility, about signs. He goes, when I am boyish, training to compete for best, our training facilities on a sign, very largely painted said, we are what we walk between. No, okay. We are what we walk between.
I like what I saw on a shirt in Japan once. I think it was like the label or something. It just said noon is the best time.
Noon is the best time?
No, new, N-E-W.
Ooh,
New is the best time.
Like, that's
okay,
very cool.
Actually, that makes sense.
That's not wrong, right?
Yeah, what's the alternative?
All right. Not new.
So, talking now about Oren Incandenza, page 291. Remember, Oren is the awful brother. Hooks up with everybody. Just hedonistic, really nihilistic, actually, above all. He has this kind of like promiscuity that's not rooted in even seeking pleasure. It's more just like his hopeless bitterness at everything. He's super black-pilled. But Oren actually, Oren is an amazing junior tennis player, like anyone at Enfield Tennis Academy, who randomly discovers that he has the best punting leg in the world and ends up becoming a professional football player in the NFL for the Arizona Cardinals. Here's how that happens. He's at Boston University. Oren decides just to try out for the football team. I think he went to play tennis at Boston U, which again, Enfield Tennis Academy, we talked about these boarding academies, are so elite. It's like Eton matriculating to Oxford. Like, the goal is to go to this tennis academy and like go right to the professional tour. So most people being a Division I athlete, that's already 1% of 100. It's amazing, right? For some of these guys, it feels kind of disappointing. Whatever. But Oren, they make a point in the book, like anyone at Enfield, even like a mid-level player, could get a Division I scholarship anywhere because the competition was so intense at that junior level. David Foster Wallace, by the way, it's worth noting, a lot of you people that are fans of him know this, was an amazing tennis player himself. He was a junior-ranked player in Illinois when he was a kid. And I don't know what happened.
Well, if you weren't in that sort of category, he wouldn't have written this,
Certainly. Ernest Hemingway, you write what you know.
Right,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So anyways, but I'm just saying that Foster Wallace actually was very good. He did not play tennis in college, I believe, David Foster Wallace, nor professionally, but he was of that talent. Like, it's amazing. He was in that stream, that potentiality. He was a very good tennis player, the author, Foster Wallace. Oren goes to BU, decides I'm done with tennis. So here's what happens. Oren's at this like BU practice. He tries out for the football team and gets his butt kicked. He tries out as like whatever, a linebacker, a receiver, running back, just gets crushed. The destiny grade, you're talking about destiny, or what, again, like Christians, Catholics would call providence, God's will, right? Fate, as more secular people would say. Destiny has no beeper. Destiny always leans trench coat out of an alley with some sort of psst that you usually can't even hear because you're in such a rush to or from some important event you've tried to engineer. The destiny grade event that happened to Oren Incandenza at this point was that just as he was passing glumly under the home goalposts and entering the shadow of the south exits added, a loud and ominously orthopedic cracking sound, plus then shrieking, issued from somewhere in the field behind him. So he's leaving the football tryout. Their starting punter gets his leg broken, cracked in half by the rush of the defensive line. And so anyways, the football it gets blocked and it goes over to Oren. Oren picked up the blocked punts ball. The head coach was gesturing impatiently from his position at the midfield bench. Oren held the football, feeling its weird oval weight, and looked way upfield at the stretcher bearers and punter and assistants and coach, and then he kicks it and just, well, wow. Imagine it's like a guy, there was a guy recently, I don't know how much, everyone knows this, but like, I'm sure this is pretty common knowledge. To throw a baseball 100 miles an hour is ridiculously hard. The average man, untrained man, people don't realize this. People always like, oh yeah, the fish was this big. People are like, the untrained guys like, oh yeah, major leaguers, they throw baseballs like 93, 95 miles an hour. Pitchers do. I could probably throw like 70. The average untrained man would throw 40 miles an hour. It's about that. If you just,
and I know that probably because you have told me that before.
I might have said before.
I was able to pull that 40 out of my
That's
head,
awesome.
Which is shocking.
If you're even sitting there just like in throwing the ball with a nice, not too much of a loop, but just a nice gliding playing catch, and it's like, oh, that guy can throw a baseball. He's probably throwing 50 miles an hour. Even like there's a thing last year, major league catchers who have unbelievable arms. Anyone who's seen like a Mariners game, whatever, think about a catcher thrown from, guys trying to steal second base, thrown from behind the home plate, has to throw it on an absolute missile in less than 2 seconds, 40 yards. The average discrepancy of major league velocity last year for catchers was like 74 to 84 miles an hour, right? Like the guys have some of the best arms in the entire world, like 74 to 84 miles an hour.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think this is your class of the semester.
This is my last class semester.
Thank you for everything you've done.
What do we owe the pleasure of this meeting?
I just want to acknowledge you're a great professor here.
You are far too kind. We're talking about our last class is
your favorite.
Infinite Jest. I'll tell you again. I'm telling everyone, on the video and stuff. I've mentioned this multiple times, but this guy is so good. We read last class from a Cistercian monk who wrote an article about him that came out last month in Humana Review called "He Misses Someone He's Never Met." And David Foster Wallace twice failed RCIA, was very much Flannery O'Connor, God-haunted style. And in that book, the Cistercian monk, or this article, Waldstein says, in all of his writings, there is this idea of like being submerged in sin, but not being able to name it or the way out. That's what we're discussing. Cool. And you came at the point where one of these guys who is a tennis player, by happenstance, discovers that he has an amazing ability to punt footballs. So that's where we are.
Sweet. I won't interrupt you any further. I just wanted to say thank you.
You're the absolute coolest. Please come. It's always a pleasure to see you. The catchers who have some of the strongest arms in the world, right? 74 to 84 miles an hour. Now that everyone has that kind of context, right? And the average major league fastball is like 91, 92. There was a guy recently, very talented kid, obviously, but he hadn't played baseball like in 4 or 5 years, who at some major league stadium, they have those fast pitch things, right? He threw 96 miles an hour. That is what this is like. That is crazy. Again, most guys, even like really big, strong weightlifter guys, if they break 60 miles an hour, throwing their arm out of their socket, one of those, Seattle Mariners speed booths. It's like, you have a decent arm, 60 miles an hour. That's not awful. There was a guy recently, some YouTuber who does baseball videos, offering like $100 to anyone off the street who could break 70 miles an hour. And everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I can do it." None of them got even like past 55. It was like this kid messed around with his friends through 96. Wow. And that's a legit reading. Like the radar reaches them out of the hand, feet per second. 150 feet per second is 100 miles an hour, or 146 feet, whatever. Like people mistakenly think, "Oh, well, it was 96 because he's throwing so close." I can throw the ball as hard as I can off that wall here, or go outside and throw across the football field. It'll be the same reading. It's the real reading out of my hand. Mm-hmm. So Oren Incandenza picking up a football and punting it 70 yards is like a random guy. Imagine the attendant being like, "Oh yeah, dude, okay." He's expecting to see 60 or 58 and he throws 96, which is better than major leaguers. That's Oren Incandenza. So they say by the second week, O was up to around 65 yards. By Halloween, his control was even better than his distance. It wasn't by accident the special teams assistant described it as touch. Consider that a football field is basically just a grass tennis court. So they talk about like Oren becomes like an expert at lobbing shots, lobbing punts the way that he used to do, with that. And already very, very quickly he becomes like the premier punter in America. Last point about this here. In his initial home start, wearing a padless uniform didn't fit in a wide receiver's number, he was summoned when BU's first drive stalled in the 40 of a Syracuse team that had no idea it was in its last season of representing an American university, a side issue. College sport analysts would later use the game to contrast the beginning and end of different eras, but a side issue. Oren had a book long of 73 yards that day, and an average hang of 8-point-something seconds. But that first official punt, exhilarated, he sent over the head of the Orangeman back waiting to receive. He says it goes about 90 yards. This is insane. So this is not the kid throwing 96 in the speed booth. This is the kid throwing 108. Like some random guy you just discover has the greatest arm in world history. By the way, the kid who threw 96 at that booth, the Oakland Athletics signed him the next day. And now he got cut in single A, which is Spokane Indians. But again, people, the uninitiated, like, oh, that's too bad. That's still, he became part of a major league organization overnight because he threw 96 miles an hour. So the truth is stranger than fiction. Like, if someone could actually do this, real punters, I think a good punt time for NFL, hang time means when you kick it to how long it stays in the air before it comes down. A real great hang time is like 4.5 or 5 seconds. Let's say maybe it's 5 seconds. He has an 8-second hang time. That's insane. How far can the best punter ever punt the ball? Not counting roll, because you can have a 99-yard punt that rolls. How long can someone kick from foot to touchdown? I don't know, 65, 70 yards. He punts it 90 yards. So Oren discovers, and then the rest of the story is in and out of him playing in the NFL and whatever. But here's the thing here. There's a girl watching him here called the P-GOAT. P-G-O-A-T. It's an acronym. Prettiest girl of all time. The P-GOAT. And the P-GOAT, let me just go freestyle on her story. Her and Oren become romantically involved somehow. She is literally like the most beautiful woman ever. She's like unapproachable. People won't even like get near her. But she factors in a huge part of the story. Her mom, the P-GOAT, her name is Joelle, it's a real name. She's from Kentucky. And she comes from a family, it's her mom, and her dad. Her mom becomes progressively enraged at how close her dad is becoming to her. That like Joelle, the dad, even when Joelle becomes, older and older and like already a young woman, wants to just take her to the movies all the time, spend so much time with her or whatever, to where the mom's feeling neglected. Like, you just want to spend all the time with the daughter, she's so great, I'm just this old hag. So she throws, at one point in frustration, throws acid at her husband's face, because he's like a chemist. He ducks, Oren ducks, they had been home, meet the family, Joelle gets hit right in the face.
Yeah, of course.
So the prettiest girl of all time gets horribly deformed, and she's part of this like group of deformed people. But in Infinite Jest, if I can find the note in a second, we talked about this book for 100 years. I mentioned in the earlier part of the stream, when I was at the University of Illinois and did a class called Fiction and Historical Imagination, I did 6 classes on this. And that was, and we still only covered excerpts. You can't, A final time, I read this book the first time ever in the summer of 2016. Read it every night, was excited to read it, looked forward to reading it. It took me 3 months to read it. Like May through August. So it's like, how can we cover that in, even 3-hour episode? But Joelle is the star of Infinite Jest. Himself, remember James Incandenza, the guy who kills himself in the microwave, makes her the star of the show. And she's somehow like, that's part of the kind of seduction of it. But I think it really is, it's not so much meant to be sexual as kind of like psychological. Like you just can't, it's so weird, but she's like veiled because she's deformed from acid. A lot of weird, again, I hope at this point, like you're thinking, I gotta read it. People always hear this, oh, this is the ultimate bro book. Like, I know so many guys who pick up Infinite Jest, never make it past 100 pages. Well, they're losers. I mean, let's be honest. No, like, you can get through it. I've mentioned this many times, like, I don't understand people being intimidated by this book. It is so fun. You have to work. You have to, in the start of this episode, people watching on YouTube, but people in class have not seen that, obviously. I open with a 5-minute clip of various interviews from David Foster Wallace. And he rightfully says, he's like, things that are like complicated like this have always played to a smaller audience. They're harder, they're less well known, but they're maybe they're worth the work, in that way. And I agree. All right, guys. We have probably 15 minutes left. Okay. So here I'll read you something about the Ennett House. This is good. Page 137. We haven't talked enough about that yet. Remember, himself, James Incandenza makes Infinite Jest, Johnny Gentle, Onan, and of course. And I love that. I love sports so much. I love that one of the main focus points, if not the main focus point, is the tennis stuff. I freaking love sports, so it's great. But the drug house is a big part too, and the main character is this guy, this criminal, convict guy, who, he's a bad guy, but he also has this good heart, and his name is Don Gately. Let me just read you this whole thing on page 137. Ennett House Drug and Alcohol Recovery House was founded in the year of the Whopper by a nail-tough old chronic drug addict and alcoholic who had spent the bulk of his adult life under the supervision of the Massachusetts Department of Corrections before discovering the fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous and undergoing a sudden experience of total self-surrender and spiritual awakening in the shower during his 4th month of continuous AA sobriety. This recovered addict/alcoholic, who in his new humility so valued AA's tradition of anonymity that he refused to even use his first name, and was known in Boston AA simply as, quote, guy who didn't even use his first name. Opened Ennett House within a year of his parole, determined to pass on to other chronic drug addicts and alcoholics what had been so freely given to him in the E-tier shower. Ennett House leases a former physician's dormitory in the Enfield Marine Public Health Hospital complex, equipped to provide 22 male and female clients a 9-month period of closely supervised residency and treatment. Ennett House was not only founded but originally renovated, furnished, and decorated by the nameless local AA ex-con who, since sobriety didn't exactly mean instant sainthood, used to lead select teams of early recovery dope fiends on after-hours boosting expeditions at area furniture and houseware establishments. This legendary anonymous founder was an extremely tough old Boston AA galoot who believed passionately that everyone, no matter how broad the trail of slime they dragged in behind him, deserved the same chance at sobriety through utterly total surrender that he'd been granted. It's a kind of extremely tough love found almost exclusively in tough old Boston galoots. And there's a lot of this idea of like sin, but redemption, like coming back. Gately is this kind of like redemptive figure. He's awful and terrible. He's a bad guy. He's a common criminal, does a lot of really gross stuff, but he's always searching for redemption. Remember, well, we can't even name his name at thought. Like, he's searching for God, obviously. He's searching for ultimate redemption. And all these things are kind of like proper steps on that path to the true light, right? All right, let's continue clipping along. Okay, so page 374. The why of the disease. This is back at Boston, AA and Ennett House. The why of the disease is a labyrinth. The why of the disease is a labyrinth that is strongly suggested all AAs boycott. Inhabited as the maze is by the twin minotaurs of why me and why not, aka self-pity and denial, two of the similarly smiley-faced sergeant arms, more fearsome aides de camp. The Boston AA in here that protects against return to out there is not about explaining what caused your disease. It's about a goofy, simple, practical recipe for how to remember you've got the disease day by day, how to treat the disease day by day. And they talk about the constant need of like surrender, self-acceptance. Anyone who's been through any kind of like 12-step program, this would all seem very, very kind of familiar and old hat. And indeed, once more, as I mentioned earlier with Foster Wallace, just as he had a lot of experience as a junior tennis player and wrote so much from what he knew in that sense, he also was in alcohol and drug rehab. While I think he studied briefly, he already had put out his first novel, The Broom of the System, in 1987, age 25, but briefly was a philosophy major at Harvard University. And I think he made some...
His dad was a philosophy professor.
His dad was...
And his mom an English professor?
Yes, I believe that's correct. And I mentioned this, well, multiple times, but I don't know how many times on this stream. Like I said, the first time that I taught this book was at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. That's where he was from. His dad was a philosophy professor at the University of Illinois. And his mom was, I think, an English professor at Parkland College, which is right across town. Urbana-Champaign are sister cities. The University of Illinois' Urbana-Champaign is literally in between both of those, kind of bleeding onto both parts of the city, and kind of, I think it's his own zip code anyways. Parkland is in Champaign. So kind of like right across the way. But for a while, Foster Wallace studied a year. I think he was also at the University of Arizona too for something. Which again, why? Hal and the Wildcats. Everything is, this is not at all an autobiographical piece, but you write what you know, as you said so correctly. When he was at Harvard, he made some kind of quip. I think he's being sarcastic, but he's like, I found out studying philosophy meant nothing more than like doing the professor's laundry. But I think he meant like he just hated he already had published a novel, and now he has to go and like, oh yeah, like drink the wisdom of these people and it's kind of pretentious, nonsense. I am the biggest fan of philosophy, but I think he thought, it wasn't that. It was just we're supposed to hear him kiss butt the entire time, and no thank you. But he got involved in drugs, whatever. So the Ennett House part of the story is very much his part of the story. too. And here's
very much a drug era, you know. He grew up
huge drug era. Oh, totally. It's the 90s. It's the age of self-indulgence. If people say the 70s was the me decade, the 90s the ultimate in that idea. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the 70s was so much, you know, I mean, maybe not as hard drugs as much, but for David Foster Wallace, you know, growing up in the 70s and coming of age in the sort of free love and drug.
100%. Yeah. So if he's no, okay, I see what you're saying. I mean, he's a lot of his, from what I understand, like his rehab time, whatever, is like late 80s, early 90s. But no, I see what you're saying.
But he's
high school, yeah, 100%.
Out on that.
If he's when it was freshman, sophomore year of high school is 1977. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean that was the era when you know, every high school kid who actually wanted to have fun at a high school dance would be doing drugs. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, like once more, there's so much just kind of like drawn from his own, the depths of his own kind of like personal coming of age and whatever. Last note on Edit House, about their motto. Remember earlier about like they can kill you, but eating you is harder. Here's Edit House's motto, trying to avoid, you know, relapse. In other words, check your head at the door. Though it can't be conventionally enforced, Boston AA's real root axiom is almost classically authoritarian, maybe even proto-fascist. Some ironist who decamped back out there and left his meager effects to be bagged and tossed by staff into the Edit House attic had, all the way back in the year of the Tux medicated pads, permanently engraved his tribute to AA's real prime directive with a rosewood-handled boot knife in the plastic seat of the 5-man men's room's commode. Do not ask why if you don't want to die. Do like you're told if you want to get old.
It was a family.
That's a guy's actual name?
Yeah.
Wow. Change your name, right?
Yeah, right.
So listen, this is, okay, this is actually where, here on page 788, it's explained what is an infinite jest, okay? And by the way, Madam Psychosis is Joelle, the P-goat, the prettiest girl of all time. Molly Notkin tells the USOUS operatives their understanding of the après-garde auteur Geo Incandenza's lethally entertaining infinite jest, 5 or 6, is that it features Madam Psychosis as some kind of maternal instantiation of the archetypical figure Death, sitting naked, corporeally gorgeous, ravishing, hugely pregnant, her hideously deformed face either veiled or blanked out by undulating computer-generated screens of color or anamorphosized into unrecognizability as any kind of face by the camera's apparently very strange novel lens. Blah, 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 blah. And so like, there's this idea, right? Like if you're going to say this is the most beautiful woman of all time, or it's the funniest film of all time, it's the best joke, don't tell that. Because once, and he talked about that too, that you have this perfect idea in your mind, once you explain it, you ruin it. But I mean, he gives us a little taste of kind of what is actually on that film, what is actually going on. That it features, again, this P-goat woman involved with the son, Orin, deformed by accidental, being hit accidentally by this acid thrown by her mother. So much of the, just here, like it's an extraordinarily postmodern book, obviously, but just classic, you know, plot lines overlapping, whatever it may be, things that don't need much further comment on. I'm actually going to finish with page 967. It's the last thing I want to talk about, because it's the point I made earlier about the guy who just wanted someone to touch him. That's the last thing I'll finish with. But just a couple more, I'll come back to 967 and a couple other points. Okay, I'll read you this on page 107 because we haven't talked enough about the wheelchair assassins. Once more, right? I'm not going to go through all the different localities. We've fairly covered that. We've talked about all the different parts the book plays with. Remember, subsidized time chronologically structures it. We bounce back and forth on the main focal points. We got that. The last people we haven't talked about are these wheelchair assassins. Remember that Avril, the moms, is somehow tangentially or whatever involved with. There's a long dialogue between these two agents an American guy, and this guy Marath of the Wheelchair Assassins. And they just talk about, you know, whose system is better. So steeply made notions of, and Marath first says, and again, he's purposely, he's a Quebecois guy, he speaks awful English, so it's read as purposely, you know, whatever, like broken up. As, if you will give it permission, does this love you speak of, Mr. Tyne's grand love? It means only the attachment. Tyne is attached, fanatically. Our attachments are our temple. What we worship, no. What we give ourselves to. What we invest with faith. Steeply made notions of weary familiarity. Here we go. Marath ignored this. Are we not all of us fanatics? I say only what you of the USA only pretend you do not know. Attachments are of great seriousness. Choose your attachments carefully. Choose your temple of fanaticism with great care. What you wish to sing of as tragic love is an attachment not carefully chosen. Die for one person? This is craziness. Persons change, leave, die, become ill. They leave, lie, go mad, have sickness, betray you, die. Your nation outlives you. A cause outlives you. So Marath, the Wheelchair Assassins, fanatically committed to finding the entertainment, Infinite Jest. And the first time we see Infinite Jest in action is there's this medical attaché from like Saudi Arabia, whose wife has like a Tuesday night meeting with the girls or whatever, and she puts on this entertainment for him, and she finds him dead a couple days later or something like that. And he's just like slumped in a chair, watching it on repeat. And then I think actually what's hilarious is she comes in and she looks at it and she dies, and like 9 people die before they finally contact someone and say, go in there and turn it off, don't look at it. This has like a Medusa-like effect. It'll turn your brain to stone or butter or melt you, whatever, right?
Yeah, you just keep watching it on an infinite loop.
Exactly. And Steeply and Marath, the two agents.
So you die.
Exactly. And Steeply and Marath, the two agents, are talking about poison and antidote. The entertainment is the poison, is the weapon of mass destruction. Infinite Jest, they're looking for an antidote. But we're not any more sure that they actually do have copies. Also, does this quote, anti-entertainment the film's director supposedly made to counter the lethality, does it really also exist as some kind of remedy or antidote? So they're also talking about, like, they're trying to find, are there disseminated copies? What's the original? Where is it? Spoiler, or just I won't comment further, but John Wayne factors into this a lot. The main tennis player, the excellent, the #1 tennis player at Enfield Tennis Academy. Okay, so they kind of go back and forth. Last 2 things. We're basically out of time. Just want to show you how the, oh no, you know what? I'll read, this will be the penultimate thing that I read. And then I'll actually finish with reading how the book actually starts. We'll just finish with reading from the Year of Glad. That's the appropriate place to end. But listen to this, it's funny. Once more, you know, looking to fill that God-shaped hole with anything but. And these guys come from a Catholic family, are onto some of that. Its outline eventually boiled down to this. A desperate Barry Loach, and just about camped out in front of the candle-lighting apse of the Loach's parish church, Loach challenges his brother to let him prove somehow, risking his own time, Barry's, and maybe safety somehow, that the basic human character wasn't as unempathetic and necrotic as the brother's present depressed condition was leading him to think. So this guy says, these 2 brothers have this bet. Can I stand outside and get people to touch me? And I won't leave my post till I'm touched. I'm going to prove to you you're wrong about being bitter and depressed, that no one cares, no one has any empathy. Someone will come and give me the human contact I'm obviously asking for. It's possible that the respectable citizenry with their book bags and cellulars and dogs with little red sweater vests thought that sticking one's hand way out and crying, quote, touch me, just touch me please, was some kind of new STEM type argot for lay some change on me. Because Barry Loach found himself hauling in a rather daily impressive total of money. Significantly more than he was earning at his work-study job. So, once more too, right? How do we treat the poor? There's this amazing question of do we just throw change to the poor? But I don't even look at this guy. He's made beneath me. Again, the book, for the 1000th time, is so crazy, terribly Catholic. So much diving into how do we love neighbor? Do we love our neighbors ourselves? And ultimately, out of love for God. But if we can't even name God and can't name sin, and therefore name the path out of sin to God, are we just lost in a kind of postmodern blah, blankness? To where at one point, talk about Hal doing drugs at ETA. Enfield Tennis Academy, and Foster Wallace beautifully writes, Hal became more interested in the secrecy of doing the drugs than the drugs themselves. The greater high was just trying to get away from being a bad boy, anything to feel like rebellious, right? Remember his Mr. Squishy point from last class in that article. The article that the Cistercian monk, that one of Foster Wallace's short stories, a fictional candy company makes candies called felonies, and that gets everyone to buy them because we're so rebellious by nature. The Mr. Squishy company. So Barry Loach had to take incompletes in the semester's training courses and got canned from his work-study job for not showing up. And he went through weeks and then months of personal spiritual crisis as passerby after passerby interpreted his appeal for contact as a request for cash and substituted abstract loose change for genuinely fleshy contact. And some of the T Station's other disreputable STEM artists became stemming, by the way, is Boston slang for panhandling. And some of the T Station's other disreputable STEM artists became intrigued by Barry's pitch, to say nothing of his net receipts, and started themselves to take up the cry of, touch me, please, please, someone. So this idea that starts off as like, I'm going to prove to you people love each other, it turns into like a panhandling technique. Woe is humanity. How does the book begin? Amazing. It starts off, Year of Glad. I am seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies. My posture is consciously congruent to the shape of my hard chair. There is a cold room. In university administration, wood-walled, Remington hung, double-windowed against the November heat, insulated from administrative sounds of the reception area outside, at which Uncle Charles, Mr. DeLint, and I were lately received. I am in here. 3 faces have resolved into place above summer-weight sport coats and half Windsors across the polished pine conference table, shining with the splendored light of an Arizona noon. There are 3 deans of admissions, academic affairs, athletic affairs. I do not know which face belongs to whom. I believe I appear neutral, maybe even pleasant, though I've been coached to err on the side of neutrality, not attempt what would feel to me like a pleasant expression or a smile. And you'll have to read the rest to dive. You have to read that's the first 2 paragraphs. You read the next 1,000 pages to ascertain for yourselves if you think this work is as worthy as I do and does all these things that have not shut up about in the past 3 hours.
So